have my phone with me.
Russ, does that mean we're live?
Yeah, we're live. Hang on. I don't have my phone with me to make sure we got the notification, so let's just wing it, I guess. Here comes the intro.
You know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
And we are live. Greetings to our loyal WFYL listeners around the world. Welcome back to your Philadelphia live stream, only on the Freedom Station. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in once again, because you still have the right to hear and the right to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike G. As always, with me are Philly Chris, Russ the producer, and Liberty Lee. And you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters. And you can listen to our program every Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. So let's be heard. I want to remind our listeners that you can participate in the free and open exchange of thoughts and ideas throughout the entire week by visiting MikeGinTheMorning.com. What's it called, Philly Chris?
MikeGinTheMorning.com.
How about you, Russ?
MikeGinTheMorning.com.
Liberty?
MikeGinTheMorning.com.
So tell your friends, tell your family, tell your barber, tell your Uncle Jerry, tell anybody who listen to check us out at MikeGinTheMorning.com. I also want to remind our listeners about the powerhouse lineup we've got here at the Freedom Station family, 1180 WFYL. We've got Ben Shapiro bringing you the Ben Shapiro Show weekdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Scott Adams coming at you with the Scott Adams Show weekdays from 9 a.m. all the way until noon.
11.
We've got, what's that?
It's 11 now, Mike.
It's 11 now.
To be fair, I forgot to change the graphic. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Glad we've got a producer here, Ross. Appreciate you showing up.
Hey, who you calling a producer, huh?
I know, I've been very generous with that term for quite some time.
Throwing that around there, Mike.
We've got Scott Adams bringing you the Scott Adams Show. At the graphic you did provide, 9 a.m. until noon. 9 a.m. until 11.
Yeah, 11 noon.
11 noon.
But with a 2. It's
All right.
I'm working on it. Give me a
Just
break.
tune in
9
till
a.m.
12, don't worry
until
about
11.
It's been a rough week.
We've got the great, the one and only Dan Bongino bringing you the Dan Bongino Show from noon right until Ben Shapiro. And finally, we want to welcome to the Freedom Station family Michael Knowles, bringing you the Michael Knowles Show weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. So don't forget to tune in. Well, we've got a new edition.
Hey, we forgot about
Freedom
those
Station
guys
family.
11 to noon.
Somebody had to fill in that gap between 11 o'clock and noon, 11 noon and 12 noon, right? We've got the Kinetic Faith Show coming at you with values, service, and order weekdays from 11 a.m. until 12 noon. So don't forget to tune in and show them some love. And with that, you know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Now you can hit it, Russ.
You know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
We call him Sloppy Russ, folks. Sloppy Russ. It used to be Sleepy Russ. Now it's Sloppy Russ.
Oh, all right.
I want to open up the program. I know we're having fun, but I want to bring a very serious matter to everybody's attention. We have previously on this program discussed the Stack family with Stack's Farmstead and Hope Stack, who was born with the condition that she's facing, and she's been so brave, so courageous, and she's been hanging in there and fighting to continue on with this battle against this condition. We've got a video update that we want to share with our listeners. So, Russ, if you can go ahead and play that clip, I want everybody to hear how Hope's journey is going as of right now.
It's probably fine.
All right, we got a quick update on Hope. Her breathing tube was removed, the IV in her neck was removed, the catheter was removed. She's been taken off all the meds except for blood pressure meds. She's still on the breathing tube. She's got normal oxygen levels, which is really good. She's responsive. You'll see at the end of the video, she can hear and see a lot better than she did. They're removing the wound vac on Monday, and she's gaining weight. She's up a pound or so to 9.2 pounds. So all this is really good progress. We're very happy. Thank you for all of the support and well wishes from everybody. Thanks a lot. The GoFundMe is still up if anybody wants to donate, because we will be needing some help. Thanks again to everybody.
What a beautiful girl.
Yeah, she looks pretty good now.
We're keeping their family in prayer. We're keeping Hope in prayer, and we want everybody to contribute whatever you can. There's no excuse not to donate $1 or $5 or whatever you can afford to donate. We posted the GoFundMe on our social media, so you can find that through any of our social media pages. We're proud of her, and we're with her family the entire way. And the entire Mike G in the Morning family, I believe I speak for all of us in saying that we're all praying for her and we're all with you. So that's good news, a very good update. Chris, as a parent, how does that make you feel watching something like that?
You know, I'm getting a little emotional, to be honest with you. It's hard to see that. I feel extremely blessed and fortunate to have healthy kids. You know, I can't imagine going through that. But yeah, definitely, folks out there, if you're in a position to be able to help out a little bit or a lot or whatever, please do. You know, good cause. Yeah, hopefully.
Very, very good cause, very worthy cause. Russ, Liberty, do you have anything to add to that? Because before we continue with the madness, I want to make sure we get through this important stuff, because I think this is a cause that everybody can get behind, and it's incredibly important.
I just want to say she's just so precious, and sometimes we take the little things for granted, and she's such a fighter. She
right.
gives me a lot of strength looking at her, and even the little steps and little progress. Thank God every day for any progress, and we are rooting for her. She's given all of us strength here just watching her. So get out there and donate, everybody.
That's right. How about you, Russ?
I don't know what to say.
Not the greatest with words, Russ.
Not exactly a wordsmith, all right?
Words are difficult. I understand that it's something that you see it breaks your heart. Sometimes difficult to put out the right words.
We have Russ out there to show the video, and I think it's important, to have the update. So
Randy, good news from Randy,
sure.
says, I haven't been on Facebook because I'm currently serving a 30-day sentence in Facebook jail, but I'll definitely be donating. Great to hear.
Oh, goodness.
Great to hear that you went to jail. That means you did something right, right?
That's right. Congratulations.
Told the truth too much, Randy.
Shout out to Randy.
That's how it works around here. Rita says, God bless this little angel. DG said, today is Padre Pio's feast day. Saint of healing, right? And not Catholic, so forgive me that I don't know the ins and the outs. I know that I do have a Catholic client who, anytime we've got a family member who's ill, a lot of our listeners know that I've got a family member who's been dealing with medical issues for several years, and I'm the primary caretaker, and the client always says, I'll be praying to Padre Pio for that one. I believe, actually, there's a Padre Pio, I don't want to say a memorial, but there's some kind of attraction that they have right in, I don't know if it's northern Chester County or Montgomery County, right up Route 100. I always see the signs for that. Have you ever noticed that, Philly Chris? I know you used to live in the area.
I think I recall that. I'm not exactly sure, though. It's been a while since I've been over that way. Yeah. Where is it? Off 202 or something? Or
I think it's on Route 100.
Oh, Route 100. Okay.
Yeah, almost up towards Russ. That sort of.
Oh,
way.
really? Oh,
DG
okay,
says
that way.
Shrine.
Okay.
It's called a Shrine.
Shrine.
Well, thank you
Okay.
for educating me, DG.
Nowhere near Route 100. I lived in North Pole. There's
Yeah, not
actually a
out that way
North
as much
Pole in
anymore.
Australia.
It's in Bali. She says it's in Bali. There we go.
Okay.
Knew it was somewhere over there. All right. So everybody get over there and let's help Hope. And we know that she's going to push through and can't wait to see the wonderful things she has ahead of her and the Stacks family has ahead of them. So with that, I want to get into some of the fun stuff. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. Get into some of the madness over here because it's very good news to see stories like that with Hope fighting and pulling through. We do have a lot of extremely concerning, to say the least, things going on in this country right now. We see things that are concerning going on all over the world, in Australia in particular, when it comes to the freedoms and liberties being restricted to the utmost degree in light of the pandemic. And something was brought to my attention very recently, and I'm hoping to have somebody come on the program to talk about this. Unfortunately, because of the landscape in terms of employment, it's very difficult for many people to come on out there and tell these stories, because if they do, it could mean losing their job, and it would likely mean losing their job. Ultimately, we've got a guy who went to work for a law firm and has a religious objection to taking the vaccine. Now, I hate how conservatives always have to say this, but we always come out there initially and say, listen, I'm not anti-vax, but I'm anti the government telling you what you got to do. That's understood, and that's a given at this point in time. I don't think anybody with the intelligence that God gave geese listens to this program and thinks I'm standing on the mountaintop and giving any kind of medical advice that is clearly not my area of expertise. But what I am qualified to talk about is government intrusion. And that's a lot of what we're seeing with these vaccine mandates. Now, this isn't on the government side. This has to do with private employers. And generally speaking, when you're dealing with private businesses, conservatives tend to be on the side of private businesses can make their own rules, do what they've got to do. That doesn't mean you can't be concerned by some of the policies that are going on. Ultimately, this man has a religious objection to taking the vaccine. And the recruiter that he was working with before going to this firm was well aware that he had a religious objection. He made that very clear from the beginning. So the recruiter and the firm themselves knew that this man would not be taking the vaccine. They made that very clear from the outset. So gets hired, begins at the firm, and sometime thereafter, the firm imposes a vaccine mandate.
Oh.
So his position has not changed. He says, I have a religious objection to taking this vaccine. And if you look at the way these sorts of things have played out legally, when you're looking at government employers, you're looking at, whether it's a state agency or anything like that, the Supreme Court has taken a look at religious exemptions or even accommodations in terms of a particular policy. And ultimately, if you look at a case called Thomas versus the Review Board of Indiana, the court held ultimately that when they're determining whether to grant or deny a religious exemption or some kind of accommodation, government's resolution to that question really shouldn't be their perception of the particular belief or the practice in question. And the reason is they're not in the position to be picking and choosing, quote, religious beliefs and whether they're acceptable, logical, consistent, or comprehensible to others in order to merit First Amendment protection. Another quote is, "It is not for us to say that the law he drew was an unreasonable one." So they have had the opportunity to look at these sorts of things. Now, that was with a government entity. We're not looking at private employers. However, people can claim religious exemptions to policies if it's based on their religion. And one of the main points that's come into play when it comes to religious objections to taking the vaccine is that people have become aware, and the research, and obviously a lot of this has been highly publicized, more so than many other medical treatments in the past. A lot of them we don't necessarily dig into and look into what exactly is going on behind the scenes. But the claim here is that in the COVID vaccines development, when it comes to Johnson & Johnson, there's involvement of a fetal stem cell lines. And in the testing phase, Moderna and Pfizer, you have the involvement of fetal cell lines. And the religious basis, church teaches that life in the womb is sacred. They cite Psalm 139. They cite various other scriptures in terms of why taking such a vaccine would be contrary to religious principles. So somebody put in this exemption, and the response is pretty terrifying. Ultimately, the response to claiming religious exemption to the vaccine, citing specific scriptures and the reasons why, the factual basis, they had a few questions of their own. They want to clarify religious beliefs and really press people on why taking the vaccine would violate their religious principles. They come back and they ask all kinds of personal information. What other medications are you taking? Are you taking Tylenol? Are you taking aspirin? What kind of supplements are you taking? How do you make decisions as to what kind of medication and supplements that you take? And how far are we going to get into somebody's personal life?
Yeah. Just
The
gonna say,
personal
how about it's none of their
principles.
business. Yeah.
So they want you to provide a history regarding what you put into your body for an extended period of time. They want you to explain how you make those decisions about what to put in your body. And they further want to know how you've come to these conclusions based upon your religious beliefs and values. Tell me how you've done this in the past. Now, I don't know about you, Philly Chris, but I think a lot of people are learning about the involvement of fetal cell lines right now. I think there are a lot of people
Right.
who may have not been aware that the use of fetal cell lines was used in a testing phase or whatever it may be
Yeah.
with these other medications. And perhaps they took them not knowing that fact in the past. Does that mean that they can't realize something and object in the future?
It's
Does
a
that
really
mean
good
once you
point.
do
Yeah.
it, you're done?
Well, that's how they would like to, you know, to use it, apply it, just to force the vaccine on people, I guess. Yeah.
What if you've had some kind of clarity when it comes to your religious principles?
Mm-hmm.
What if you come to the point and realize, listen, I don't want to be participating in this. I'm not going to take part in killing babies and using them for medical advances and claiming it's good because it's just means to an end, right?
Sure.
Got a good result here, so not going to worry about how we got there. Is that really what we're all about?
Seems that way. Not how it should be, obviously, but yeah. Right?
I'm just disgusted.
Yeah. I hear you. Me too,
I'm
brother.
disgusted. I'm fortunate that I am not in the position where I have to answer to somebody about my medical practices and my religious beliefs in order to maintain employment. DG says there's a doctor in Jerusalem on another network that gives more than just a religious exemption. Fetal cell lines are being used long before this vaccine. This is and has been a religious battle. Like a lot of people would agree with you. I think a lot of people would agree with you. But that's where we are today.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of bad things going on these days in there, Mike. You know, you don't force this stuff on Rich Roberts as his boss, right?
He's going to be joining us later in the program.
That's right. That's why I threw it out there. I had to lighten up the moment there. No, I appreciate you saying everything you just did, Mike, because and I hear it in your voice and know how sincere you are with things. But there's so many different things, you know, that have driven me crazy, as you guys know, and from talking about it on the show over the past few years here with all this craziness. And in reality, whether it's a religious belief or not, I don't think it should be forced on anybody. You know,
right.
That's how I feel.
That's a good
But especially if you have a valid religious concern, you know, to some degree, there's even more validity there. But even if you don't, I think it's.
I want you to think in your mind of other religions and other contexts where if somebody claimed some kind of religious exemption, if you went back and questioned the person about their practices constantly and really dug into that to make sure that's what this is really all about, how people would take that. I'm sure people would be offended. People
well, then you'd be a racist or whatever, you know.
And frankly, rightfully so, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's another article that came out, St. Luke's, Lehigh Valley, St. Luke's University Health Network. Employees with natural COVID immunity can defer vaccine for a year. So recognizing natural immunity. Natural immunity after a COVID infection is actually more robust than the immunity you attain after 2 shots of an mRNA vaccine. Dr. Jahre, I don't want to mispronounce his name, but Jahre said, adding that the research has primarily been coming from Israel as well as the United Kingdom. In some cases, it can be 25 times more robust. He noted that the durability looks to last about 1 year. So ultimately, Dr. Jahre encourages people who haven't had the virus to get the vaccine. You don't want to get the natural infection, he said. You could die for it or become crippled by it. It says Morning Call initially reported last week that Lehigh Valley Health Network was considering adopting the policy as well, but a spokesperson for the health network has since confirmed in a release they had officially addressed the deferral option to its vaccine mandate for employees. So that's an interesting sort of placeholder, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that fully resolves the issue. And this is an interesting quote at the end. We always say we evaluate the data and we make a decision based on the way the evidence appears today, Jahre said. It's a rapidly changing situation, so if the data changes tomorrow, we have to change, we will change. So I'm sure some people see that as a victory, however slight, for natural immunity. I know Liberty's jumping out of her shoes over there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, jump in there, Liberty.
I've been waiting for that one to come up.
Huge advocate for natural immunity.
Yes, and I hate that I don't want to say hate, that's a strong word, but when they keep grouping the unvaccinated, they need to separate the categories when they're studying this, like unvaccinated who recovered from COVID and have proven COVID antibodies, aka natural immunity, versus just plain unvaccinated. But again, we are not for people just mandating this. Those are just really particulars that they need to study, and they should not be saying things until they know this. But I will say that there's so many more people going out there and saying it now.
All righty. So very good. Why don't we go ahead and bring in our guests at this point? We will continue with the madness after we leave. Stacks Farm said, I'm in the local electrical union, and I'm pretty sure they're going to blackball me for not taking the vax. Well, that is terrible. That's horrible to hear. We got comments sort of lit up over there.
Yeah, who's DG talking about as a hypocrite?
I don't know if we want to say that. I don't know if we want to get sued over a DG comment over here.
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. Employees of United Airlines in Texas are suing over the United vaccine mandate on ADA grounds. United has no provision for religious or medical exemptions, and refusal results in termination. Wow.
Yeah, and it's happened to military personnel. I'm sure you guys have seen
that
in the news as well.
Sure.
bunch of Navy SEALs right now are looking at retiring early or quitting because they're not going to do it. So, we're losing some of our most important military personnel as
And
well.
teachers too. I think some states that teachers are mandated, or you have to get the tests where, and I don't think they're doing the sample test with the spit. They're actually forcing that nose test
Oh, they're gonna make it as painful as possible.
many
yeah, of
times
course,
up your
of course.
nose.
Yeah. We gotta stick this garden hose up your nose and out
Sinus,
your rear end.
sinus passages
That's
matter.
all. If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's all. That's all we're gonna do.
The
That's
new
all.
test is from behind.
It's just a quick test over here.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
It's like that cartoon where the guy opens up his head and scratches his brain. Okay, let's get our other two guests. We got Dr. Val Fennell joining us,
All right,
as well
who's-
as the better half of the Justice Brothers, as he'd like you to believe, Richard S. Roberts. Long overdue on this program. Both of them
Yeah.
really long overdue on this program. Dr. Val is going to give us a little bit of an update in terms of Gun Lobby Day and where things are. And Rich joining for, okay, videos claiming.
Russ, what do you
Oh,
think?
yeah,
Russ is
that was-
highlighting. I did not claim that the COVID-19 vaccine will contain fetal tissue. I did not claim that
Okay.
at all. At all. Not even close.
I think Russ is a plant for YouTube now.
Yeah,
Something, something stem
Use the
cells.
same words in different orders.
No, he's helping. That is a long list there. What the heck?
Yeah, look at that.
Oh my goodness.
What's not in there?
The microchip. That one's for
Is that
Philly
in there?
Chris.
What I did say was there was an involvement of fetal stem cell lines in the vaccine's development in relation to Johnson & Johnson, or testing in terms of Moderna and Pfizer. That's what I did say.
Okie dokie.
We've got Richard S. Roberts,
Oh no!
as he's known around some parts, the better half of the Justice Brothers.
That's known around all parts of the
As
better half of
known
the show.
around the Roberts household and his bedroom. Ah. And we've got Colonel Val Fennell, Gun Owners of America.
Hello.
Dr. Val, it is a pleasure to see you. You've got the nifty setup over there.
Yeah, it
this
looks
is
pretty good with the
this
lights,
has
yeah.
changed since the last time you joined
Yeah,
us, hasn't it?
I went gamer, with the lights, and LED, even though I'm not a gamer,
And it's get an interior decorator to perform that. I might have to get their number. Don't tell me you did that yourself, because I'm gonna have you coming over to my place.
I did. You just peel it off and you stick it on the wall. It's that easy.
Oh, get out of town.
Yeah.
That's great news. So
Mhm.
we've got a lot to talk about today. Dr. Val, as I understand, you've got an update, and we've got attorney Richard S. Roberts, my counterpart, joining us on the program.
Mhm.
We've been working gun cases together for many, many years, and got several pending right now. I'd say dozens at this point. Is that fair
Uh-huh.
to say, Rich?
That's definitely fair to say.
Good
They're all
deal.
looking for positive outcomes thanks to me. But
Humility is Richard's greatest quality, if you haven't
Absolutely.
discovered that.
I'm the most humble attorney you've ever met in your entire
Yeah.
life.
He sound like he's very much like Donald Trump, right? I'm the most humble person in the world, believe me.
That's right.
Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it.
That's
And
right.
Everybody
Best,
knows
that's
it.
right.
Now
Best, the
it's
most
funny
humble,
because
the
I've been watching that new Muhammad Ali documentary that Ken Burns did. So every time he walks around like I'm the greatest, I walk in the office like, now I know why you say it all the time. I'm like, you know where I got that from.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Richard's a lot like Donald Trump. So, Dr. Val, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Well, you want to start with Philadelphia?
Why not?
Well, we have a pending lawsuit, a lawsuit that's been, going on for a few months now because of Philadelphia's recalcitrance and being unable to issue licenses to carry firearms within the statutory requirement of 45 days.
So, is this technically round two?
This is round two, and guess what? We got them down to 36 days now, and we had an affidavit from a sergeant that was just filed, and we're about ready to declare victory for the second time. But you have to. It's like you have to perpetually keep an eye on the city to make sure they don't backslide into their their old ways. But and it from what they said, it's 100%. They got them below 45 days. So we're kind of
so that's 36
wrapping
days from application to grant or denial.
Yes, right.
That's
Remember,
better than pre-pandemic, Dr. Val.
yes. Yes,
That's
it
really
was,
good. That's
and remember,
really
it was
good.
over a year in the fall of 2020. The people were getting appointments out over a year, and there were a number of lawsuits, and I think FPC got them to like 90. They agreed to 90%, but we got them to 100%.
100%. That ain't too bad. Yeah,
No, no.
Too much better than that, right?
That's right, right. So that's some really good news. What else in Philadelphia? Well, the home firearms ban that was passed in January, they tried to move that to federal court, and we're still waiting to get it remanded back to state court. They said we raised Second Amendment questions, which we really did not.
And I'm sure you purposely did not. Is that
Right.
correct?
Right,
Yeah.
right. But they're claiming we did, so they're trying to move it to federal court, and so we're the attorneys are working to get it remanded now. So that's pending. So the good news on the LTCF case is, residents of Philadelphia will be able to get their LTCFs within 45 days now. So we're just keeping an eye on them. And our attorney, his name is Andrew Austin. He's done a really great job of doing this on both times. Now, the other thing is the legislature.
Hold on. Before you do that, I do
Okay.
want to say this. Are you talking about 36 days, like actual days?
The
Like
actual
mornings
days,
and-
right.
Actual day. And the reason I asked this is Philadelphia has always been notorious for taking 45 business days
Right.
in terms of getting that license from application to grant or denial. And they've always claimed that that's good. That was always kind of arguable and questionable because that's
Right.
not what the statute says,
My
right?
understanding is it's 36. It's around 36 days now, right?
Well, even
So-
36 business days, if that were the case, that's better than what they were doing
Right.
pre-pandemic. So that's
Right.
incredible. You folks deserve a real pat on the back for that one. So anybody who cares about our Second Amendment rights and cares about your right to keep and bear arms in Pennsylvania should be getting behind Dr. Val and the cause and Gun Owners of America.
Thank you.
So that's great. So what's going on the legislative front?
Well, as Mark Twain said, no one's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. So we'll start with that. But we had our very first ever lobby day on Monday, September 20th, just this past Monday. We had first time, and it's a GOA event, and we had members and supporters coming in from all over the Commonwealth, and our focus was to lobby the Senate, because the action right now is in the Senate for three things: constitutional carry, which is on the floor of the Senate. The second thing is Senate Bill 624, which is Senator Mastriano's bill for the Right to Bear Arms Protection Act, which would basically say we are not going to cooperate with Biden's executive fiats on gun control. The federal government will have to enforce their own laws. No one in Pennsylvania is going to help you under penalty. And the third thing is to strengthen, again, going back to Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, strengthen our firearms preemption law. We have House Bill 979, which is now in the Senate, was passed in the House, which basically levels the playing field and says if a municipality such as Philadelphia or Pittsburgh violates the preemption law and decides to pass an illegal ordinance and they lose in court, they will have to pay legal fees and damages. And it also says that a membership organization like GOA would have standing. So these are the things that it would fix. And so we had a lobby day for those three things. We got a lot of co-sponsors on these bills. The question is, and as it always is, you remember what happened in the House is it was reported, the constitutional carry bill was reported from committee. Everyone in June, Republican legislators were standing on the Capitol steps, thumping their chests saying, well, we're going to run it. And then the majority leader, Kerry Benninghoff, decided, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And so Senator Corman in the Senate and Senator Kim Ward are both are co-sponsors on some of these bills. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to run the bill. So we were there to tell them on Monday to hey, we really expect this to happen.
Yeah,
So
please don't back down.
right. So we've been putting a lot of pressure on the Republican leadership, which they need a lot of, let's just put it this way, they need a lot of encouragement to do the right thing.
I've noticed something lately, Dr. Val.
Yes.
Many times Republicans are not as tough as they think they are. And many times liberals are not as smart as they think they are. I might put that on a T-shirt or a hat or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to send one to you and Richard Roberts as soon as we're done. The preemption stuff, it always drives me nuts. Obviously, I made my bones in this business fighting against the city of Harrisburg, 2 weeks into the practice of law, dealing with this preemption issue. And it always drove me nuts and made me want to pull my hair out of my head that the government just says, you know what? We don't care that we're breaking the law. Go ahead and try to do something about it. We know it's illegal. We're just going to break the law because we think we've got a good reason to do it.
Right.
And that's that. Go ahead and try to spend enough money to fight us. Isn't it a shame that we need another law to enforce an existing law because the government won't follow the law?
Yeah,
I mean,
yes, it is, and it's even worse because any mayor in this country who wants to challenge their state's firearms preemption law will get free legal help from Michael Bloomberg's Mayors for Illegal Guns, one of the Bloomberg front organizations. So they got all this Bloombucks behind them. And now, we have to hire an attorney such as yourself or a Josh Prince or somebody like that to go into court and fight them. And, this isn't cheap, it's tens of thousands of dollars and the thing is, it's on a case these cities know they're going to lose.
Right.
Right. But they don't have anything to lose. So they're really conducting a financial war of attrition against gun owners.
But really, the only way they've won these things in the past has been on standing, right?
Correct. Right.
It's because every time they've tried to get away with something legally, if it wasn't kicked on a standing issue, the court said, no, you guys can't do this. And even in the past, when they made these bogus arguments that, the preemption statute doesn't cover this, or this, even the legislature has come back and expanded the preemption statute, saying, no, you guys are totally wrong. Of course it does include that. And here it is expressly, and nothing seems to stop them. So maybe this will be the step where ultimately it reins the government in a little bit. One Second Amendment attorney you didn't mention is Richard S. Roberts. Rich, what do you think about this preemption stuff?
What do I think about the preemption stuff? Well, the preemption there, it's pretty clear. It's explicit. You need to follow the law. The issue is when you have local municipalities who just flaunt it, it's a real problem for everybody. And the way they get away with it is it's a political point for the local municipalities because the standing doesn't necessarily come from legal groups, but it also comes, they never actually enforce it against anybody.
Right.
Like there was a famous picture where there's the mayor of Philadelphia is marching. It wasn't the current mayor, previous mayor is marching through a city park with gun owners carrying guns in a city park in the city of Philadelphia, which has an ordinance that says you can't carry guns in the city of Philadelphia. But if you don't get cited, you don't have a case or controversy, you don't have standing. So it's there. Look, we're tough. You can't carry guns in a park. Except anytime somebody sees a firearm in a park, they're like, I don't know what you're looking at. I don't see the gun.
Well, with the Lower Merion case, that kind of, clarified that a little bit for us. They said, listen, you guys can't be doing this, right? You can't be just refraining from citing just to keep these laws on the books. And that famous photo, do you know about that famous photo, Philly Chris, that he's talking about?
It's got Petroni in it, right?
Eric Petroni.
Yeah.
That's right. The late great Eric Petroni.
Petroni standing right next to the mayor.
Open carry with his arm around Mayor Nutter.
And he showed me that. I was like, that is fantastic.
That is a very famous photo. A lot of people have seen that across the Commonwealth and gun owner community. I also want to back up a little bit, Dr. Val, because Rich and I deal with a lot of cases in Philadelphia dealing with the license to carry system. And you're talking about just in terms of getting this done efficiently on the front end. We also deal with this regularly on the back end. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is you have this totally ridiculous denial of a license to carry firearms based on the character and reputation clause.
Yes.
So whether it's parking tickets or the worst one that I had a guy who had his firearm in a safe in his house. His house was burglarized and they stole the safe that had the gun in the safe. And he reported the firearm stolen as a part of the burglary, and they revoked his license to carry firearms.
That's crazy.
Because they stole the safe. Other than not owning a gun, I don't know what you're supposed to do there. How could you be more responsible? I don't know what they expected of this gentleman. But you get this denial, and if you're ultimately to appeal, whether it's a denial from the outset or it's a revocation, you get a date that is so far out there. It takes forever to even get a date. And once you get that date, good luck because you're not going to court for a really, really long time. Rich, isn't that an issue that we've seen lately in these cases?
Well, yeah, we get phone calls every day about people who've got that character and reputation clause, revocation or denial, and you can appeal it. And Philadelphia, of course, has its own quote unquote appeal board. But they're like, well, how long am I talking? Oh, we'll put in the paperwork. When are we looking? 2022. Oh, when? Like Christmas? Oh, Christmas next year? I mean, in a couple of months, no, Christmas next year. And then they laugh. And then the unfortunate thing might go is like, I wish it was a joke, but that's literally when we're going to get in front of these people.
Yeah.
So it's the problem is the process takes so long on the back end that it's.
Dr. Val, wouldn't that be cured by constitutional carry?
This is what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
There you go.
That bill is on the floor, and we were hoping that Senator Corman and Senator Ward will run that bill and then move it over to the House and then pass on the House side. We have a verbal agreement. Representative Bernstein told me that Kerry Benninghoff will run the Senate bill in the House, so we're going to hold him to these promises. Yes, it would solve the problem. Of course, we got the issue of Governor Tommy,
Right.
Tyrant Tom, who will veto anything like this. The preemption bill, Mastriano's bill, the Right to Bear Arms Protection Act, or constitutional carry, all these things will be vetoed. But you know what? People say, well, why do you do it? Why bother? And I said, well, it's very important because we get a recorded vote. We want to know where all of our senators and representatives stand on the issue. And once we have a recorded vote and we roll into election year, then we know really who's on our side and who isn't. Everybody's for the Second Amendment when the election years roll around.
Sure.
Right. But when you, I even heard quite a few Democrats say things like that, and once in a while it's true, but usually not. And, so you got to hold them to it. And so we have a recorded vote. And the other thing this does, it puts the blame squarely where it would belong, is on the Wolf administration or any successor administration to him that would come along, maybe perhaps a Josh Shapiro administration, which would even be worse for gun owners. If it would be, I would think a Josh Shapiro administration would be the worst in Pennsylvania history for gun rights. I don't think there's any question about it, given his advocacy for, and his grandstanding for ghost guns or whatever those things are, chunks of metal and plastic that could be made into firearms later down the road. He tried to serialize those things and make them firearms through an attorney general opinion. So where he stands on this. So this gives us ammo to use in next year. It's a very important year. We have all the representatives are up every 2 years for election. Half the Senate in Pennsylvania, the governor and the lieutenant governor this year in 2022 are coming up for it. Plus, on the federal side, we have Senate, and Congress. So this is a huge year, and it's a kind of a halfway mark through the Biden administration. The partisan mood of the electorate has swung against Scranton Baby Joe Biden. And it's a good thing. But the other thing is some groups in Pennsylvania, some gun rights groups don't like to get involved in primaries. They'll just say,
why though? That's ridiculous, because that's the main purpose, if you ask me, because what good are these people for our Second Amendment rights? They go out there, they claim Republican, and most people will blindly vote for them if they're on the Second Amendment side because they've got that R next to their name, and they're no better than anybody else when it comes down to it.
Right. You're exactly right. They'll give multiple recommendations. They'll say, like, all the Republican candidates are. Sometimes they'll say they're recommended. Once in a while, they say they're not. But the problem is, you want to pick the best candidate in the primary and endorse early. You're taking a risk going against someone, getting on their bad side. But that's the only way we're going to fix the problem, is if we primary some rhinos and get them out. And I've got a list of a few. You probably know who they are already from what I mentioned. But that's what we have to do. We have to endorse early in the primaries, get involved in elections, get gun owners motivated to get out to the polls and vote. And this is what's going to change it. So the time for ideological purity is in the primary, not in the general election. If you waited to the general election, it's too late.
A lot of those folks, they're good for nothing. They're good for nothing, Rich.
Yes.
Rich, we had another case where constitutional carry would have certainly been to this gentleman's benefit. Dr. Val, a type of case that Rich and I often deal with is somebody who's carrying without a license but is otherwise eligible. Now, often this is mischaracterized. They misgrade this at the outset as a felony if you're otherwise eligible, not committing any other crimes, the misdemeanor of the first degree. So a lot of people see that and say, it's just a misdemeanor. Problem is, misdemeanor of the first degree carries a max possible sentence of 5 years in state prison. What does that do, Rich?
Eliminate your Second Amendment rights. You can no longer purchase or possess a firearm for the remainder of your life.
So under federal law, if you're convicted of any felony that carries a max possible sentence over 1 year, or any misdemeanor that carries a max possible sentence of over 2 years, and it doesn't matter what you actually served. Rich and I talk to people all the time. And say, oh, well, no, I didn't serve. I didn't do 5 years. I just got house arrest, or I just got probation. It doesn't matter. It's what the max possible sentence could have been.
Right,
and I went to law school because I'm bad at math. But I do know that 5 is more than 2, so that puts you into that category. Right. So it is a very serious crime for someone who, had they gone to the courthouse a few days sooner and got their license to carry, or in Philadelphia 36 days sooner, right? Right. It'd be a huge issue. Rich, we deal with this all the time, don't we?
All the time. And district attorneys' offices throughout the Commonwealth are very aggressively when they prosecute those, because they look at it and go, shouldn't have had a firearm. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter where you are, whether it's Central Pennsylvania or Philadelphia. Prosecutors' offices are very serious, very aggressive in charging those cases.
Do you think that people will make a mistake about that, though, because they come from a county that's considered a generally conservative or generally gun-friendly county, so they think that they're going to be afforded some kind of leeway? We see this problem all the time, don't we, Rich?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We had a recent case in Pike County, which would be a very firearm-friendly county, to say the least, where an individual was charged with that very offense. We asked to get him an ARD. He was an otherwise upstanding, upright citizen. Somebody will say your mom would be proud to have as their son, but they said, no, we don't do that for firearms offenses. He could plead to the misdemeanor. We eventually were successful based on, I would say, more letters of recommendation for this individual than I have ever seen in my life. He was granted ARD. But even in Pike County, where nobody would think they're anti-Second Amendment in Pike County, Pennsylvania, they're very aggressive when they prosecute these cases.
I don't know if you mentioning the exact county on the air is good for future cases over there. You could have at least said, it rhymes with Smike County.
Well, listen to the district attorney's office.
It's true though. A lot of these counties that people say, oh, we're gun friendly out here, whether it's Lancaster or it's York or wherever it may be, they're really holding people's feet to the fire when it comes to this stuff. And that's why something like constitutional carry, I don't know that the anti-gunners know about this stuff, or they just simply don't care that you have someone who's not intending to do anybody any harm. They're really not even intending to break the law, these people. Because obviously ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right.
But you're thinking about some level of culpability. These are not people who are going out and looking to knock over the 7-Eleven or looking to rob somebody or hold anybody up or anything like that. This is somebody, let's say, for example, this is a hypothetical, they've got an unloaded handgun in their trunk and they're not within exemption. It's basically as difficult to transport a handgun in Pennsylvania without a license to carry as it is to transport a handgun in New Jersey, because it's illegal unless you fall under one of those exemptions. Got to be stored in a specific manner, got to be going to and from very specific places. So if we're just going to be New Jersey without the license to carry firearms, why not have constitutional carry?
Right.
With the way it works in Pennsylvania with the licensing scheme, the difference is in New Jersey, you've got roughly 8 or 9 million residents. Fewer than 600 people have what they call a permit to carry over there. Pennsylvania, we've got 12 or 13 million residents, over 1 million people with a license to carry. So that's the difference. It's much easier to get a license to carry. It's almost impossible to get one over there. But that's just people who are getting caught up in this current system, and that would be alleviated by way of constitutional carry. Now, Dr. Val, you listen to people talk about constitutional carry like it's going to be the downfall of society and blood's going to run through the streets because of constitutional carry, as if every violent criminal is sitting in their house watching Fox News to see when constitutional carry passes, so that way they can go out and carry their guns, right?
With their MAGA hats on.
With their MAGA hats on. That's how it works? Do you have people who bring these concerns to you regularly, Dr. Val?
It happens every now and then, and we just point out we first of all, if you remember way back in the Wayback Machine when the shall issue movement started, when we went from may issue to shall issue, all the arguments were, oh, people are going to be shooting each other at stoplights and getting into all these altercations. It never happened. And back then we had one state that had quote unquote constitutional carry. It was Vermont. We even called it Vermont carry back then. Back in the 90s, we called it Vermont carry when I was running VCDL. And now we have 21 states that have constitutional carry. Texas, the most recent state. And some of these states,
a little bit of data there, right?
Right. And some of these states like New Hampshire are among the safest in the nation. Now I was meeting with Senator Vogel's staff, and the staffer looked at me and said, in this constitutional carry bill, it doesn't have any age restrictions on carry. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's one of the things that's in that may have been put into the bill intentionally or unintentionally. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we weren't the author of that. We're supporting it. But I said there shouldn't be any age restrictions. She looks at me like the world is coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And I said, in the state of New Hampshire, we're not talking about purchase. We're talking about carrying. I said in the state of New Hampshire, there are no age restrictions on carrying firearms. Live free or die, baby. Okay. And kids are not running around New Hampshire shooting each other after school. Right. Okay. This is just crazy. So I'm perfectly fine with that being in the constitutional carry bill. Right.
Chris, can you attest to that? You grew up in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I was just about to jump in because I wasn't sure if you knew that. I was from New Hampshire. And I mean, kids had their firearms in the back of their pickup trucks. My buddies would have them in their cars at school back in high school. It was a common thing to see, the gun rack in the back. They'd be out deer hunting. I wasn't a hunter myself, but I knew plenty of people who had, firearms regularly at a young age, and we learned how to shoot accurately and safely. And that's why I firmly believe it needs to be put back into our culture that way, maybe even part of the school system, because all these problems we see, I think, are a direct result of that being eliminated.
Just get everybody educated, whether they think they want to own guns or not. And that way,
there's a reason this doesn't happen in New
everybody
Hampshire.
involved, right? Because the anti-gunners are always like, oh, well, this person could get a gun without getting educated. If we just get everybody educated, right? That skill's not going to be a bad thing to have. That knowledge won't be a bad thing to have.
Right.
And everybody will just have it. And then we could all shut up about this stuff. Rich, there's another issue that we dealt with fairly recently and somewhat ongoing that would have been alleviated by constitutional carry. And this is the issue where we ran into the case that had the expired license. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. So, we had an individual call our office and was talking about they were charged with carrying a firearm without a license. Her license, she had a firearm, she was carrying it, she'd done it for many years. Her license had expired about a month, maybe a month and change prior to that. The officer said, "Do you have a license?" She had, "It's expired." I don't know if she knew or she hadn't known yet, but she hadn't got a chance to walk in to renew it, and they charged her with carrying a firearm without a license. The problem with the officer's charging decision there, because there is a period following the expiration that you have to get your license renewed before you end up on that side of the law. The officer hopefully will be educated by Mike and myself about how she is covered, because she has 6 months. And I am curious to see if the district attorney's office in that particular case tries to make up 6 months isn't really 6 months, even though it's pretty clear in the statute. I am very curious, or if they do the smart thing. But yeah, constitutional carry would have been fine in that situation. She would, unfortunately, is now stuck fighting criminal charges that she otherwise wouldn't have to.
Can you believe that, though? You got to tell them, hey, if you're going to bother bringing this charge, you got to read the 16 exemptions. Read through it, right? It's not that hard, is it?
No, and I might be a bit obnoxious. That's out of my character, actually. Be a bit obnoxious to law enforcement, but I might be a bit obnoxious to law enforcement. Going, you brought this charge. Yeah, you looked at the law. You know the law. Yeah, did you bother to read it? Well, no. It says, okay, so the answer to that question is no, I didn't read it.
be, because if you read it and you still brought this, then we've got a whole nother court case we'll be dealing with, right?
Well, it's going to be 6 months. Is it really 6 months? 6 months actually means it drops off a cliff on the expiration date. That's what it actually means. I go, oh, okay.
Dr. Val, have you dealt with anybody in these situations having these false charges that would otherwise be alleviated under constitutional carry?
No, I haven't, but Representative Bernstein tells a story about his and he was careful to say the statute of limitations has passed, but he in his House Judiciary Committee testimony, he said that his license expired. He didn't realize it, and he was carrying his firearm. And that was one of the reasons he wanted to pass constitutional carries. And you inadvertently forgot to look in your wallet and didn't keep track of the date. You know, you're not a ne'er-do-well. You're not a criminal. You're not gonna, but you just forgot to renew your license, and
Right.
you could get tripped up on that. And just we were talking about the character and reputation requirements. And Representative Devanzo actually has a bill to remove those from the concealed carry law. But the better solution to this is constitutional carry. You know, I mean, these other things, they're good bills, and they're chipping around the edges. They're doing the right thing. They're moving things in the right direction. I give Representative Devanzo a lot of credit for it. But we really have to, honest to God, just pass constitutional carry. And Philadelphia is really the poster child for the reason for doing this.
But do you think that'll give some of the politicians an out in having that other bill say, oh, well, I voted for that one. We don't need to worry about this one because I voted for that.
Yeah.
In a different makeup of, the executive, if you had somebody who could potentially sign something in, I could almost see like a House of Cards sort of deal. Remember that TV program where they're in the back rooms and the anti-gunners like, oh, we really don't want constitutional carry to pass. Let's just all get on the same page and let's just get rid of the character and reputation clause and call it a day.
Right. So you have to be careful because if you make improvements to the license to carry firearms law like that, and there's another one to exempt senior citizens and disabled veterans or whatever, and then it's like, well, it's $20 as it is now for 5 years, and then now half the people don't have to pay for it, and there's no care. It's like, why do we need constitutional carry, right? Because it's so easy. So you can actually, by passing those bills, make it more difficult for you down the road to pass constitutional carry. So, we don't discourage anybody from filing pro-gun bills. Don't get me wrong. But
sure.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it at the big picture though, and say, and I've mentioned this in my comments to the House Second Amendment Caucus, like particularly with that fee reduction bill, and I was like, we want to pass constitutional carry, and this bill could have the unintended consequence of making it more difficult down the road. I think that's where we need to go to that. And I would say, Senator Mastriano's bill is really important because of the Biden administration and what's coming down the pike. And then really for Pennsylvania, especially this preemption bill, and for the Pennsylvania specific problems that we have, constitutional carry and strengthening our preemption law will get rid of all these Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. I'm going to enact gun control overnight. Because they realize now that they're going to have to pay the fees and the damp, so they won't be passing gun control anytime soon. That's why.
Do you think Bloomberg might offer to pay those fees as well if they lose? Because if so, Rich and I are going to have a boat and an island somewhere.
Yeah, we're good.
We're just going to go around to every single county who tries to make these illegal laws, and it'll be on Bloomberg. We'll run up the bill and fight it tooth and nail all the way through the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah, and then
It's
the
like
antis
winning
are
the
saying, "Oh,
lottery.
this is just designed to make gun organizations and attorneys rich," and I'm like, "No, it's not.
You're right.
It's designed to restore some equity in the system. Right now,
Stop breaking. I got a simple solution for you. Stop breaking the law. That's all.
Right.
Stop breaking the
That's
law,
it.
and you won't
That's
have
good
to worry
advice.
about that. Piece of cake.
It's a piece of cake, is right.
I got another question that came in from Anonymous here, Rich. And Dr. Val, this sort of still plays into constitutional carry. This is a very hot topic right now, so I'm glad that you're on talking about it. This is from Anonymous. I'm trying to eliminate as many cards in my wallet as possible. Is it legal to take a photo of my concealed carry and have that photo in my phone instead of carrying the physical concealed carry license? Thank you. Well, I think that in order to answer this question, now, if you're looking for a quick answer, there is no quick answer. And here's the reason why. If you look at section 6122, proof of license and exemption, The general rule reads, when carrying a firearm concealed or about one's person or in a vehicle, an individual licensed to carry a firearm shall, upon lawful demand of law enforcement officer, produce the license for inspection. Failure to produce such license, either at the time of arrest or at the preliminary hearing, shall create a rebuttable presumption of non-licensure. So there's a couple of things that you'd have to delve into over here. So number one, Rich, is that it says failure to produce what? What do you have to produce under this statute?
A license.
The license, right? Not a photograph of the
Not a
license.
photograph of the license.
Not a photograph of the license. Not to mention the practical problem that what if your phone dies or something like that? There's a number of reasons why you perhaps wouldn't be able to access that photo on your phone, but the law talks about the license itself. Now, it also talks about the opportunity to present that license somewhere other than to that officer right there and then in the moment. What is that other place where you could present that license, Rich?
That's a preliminary hearing after you've been charged with a crime.
Right. So what has to happen in order to have that preliminary hearing? You have to get charged with a crime, right? So, Rich,
Correct.
what does that involve, getting charged with a crime potentially?
Well,
it's carry without a
powering
license,
Icon,
right? If they're
right,
charging you
yeah.
with carry without a license, could be
And you're
graded as a
otherwise
misdemeanor or
eligible.
misdemeanor of the first degree or a felony. So what does that entail?
that entails hiring an attorney, making sure you have your license, and showing up at a preliminary hearing, and wasting a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can see it if they run you in their system, right?
All right.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
separate and distinct
I'm just
issue.
throwing that out there because
Issue.
if they wanted to let it off, they could look it up and say, "Okay, I see that you're good," right? Or
Shut up, Philly
okay,
Chris.
sorry, I'm just throwing it out.
Somebody is
Not
going to be
that
sitting
would
in jail and be
happen.
like, "But Billy Chris said you could just look it up, please."
I'm not saying they would do that
mean,
for you.
The systems in Pennsylvania are not that good when it comes
Yeah,
to
right.
it.
Not the most
Just
reliable.
Jared.
And
They're not
Dr.
the
Val,
most reliable.
Dr. Val, you look like you got something on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, I do. Speaking of registration and systems, Mike, does Pennsylvania have a gun registry?
They have a registry that is not a registry.
I got laughed on by Ceasefire PA on PCN when I mentioned that. Could you let people know what the issue is with that?
Oh man, that's gonna take another 20-minute conversation.
In a nutshell?
Well, in a nutshell,
We have time,
yes,
we have time.
the way there was a case that was around a couple of decades ago, I believe. It was around a long time ago. Ultimately, it came out of Allegheny County Sportsmen's, I believe is the name of the case.
Yep.
And they sued based upon there being a registry based on records of transfer, records of sale, right, held by the state police.
Mhm.
And ultimately, what the court said was, well, because we've got a Pennsylvania law that says government can't have a registry. It's illegal for them to have a registry. So they were like, hey, excuse me, court, this looks an awful lot like a registry. What are we going to do about this? And the court was like, no, this actually isn't a registry. And it's not a registry because ultimately not every firearm has to be registered in this registry. So, for example, you wouldn't have a state level form for the purchase of a long gun, right? Or private transfers of long guns between individuals who are otherwise eligible residents of Pennsylvania and things of that nature. You wouldn't have this particular form. Or let's say somebody moves to Pennsylvania from out of state, they bring their firearms with them. It's not like you got to go and register them somewhere. Since it's not a complete registry, it's not a registry at all. And the dissent was magnificent in this case. It was Friedman, I believe. And she was just basically like, what the heck? Am I on crazy pills? This looks an awful lot like a registry. What the heck are we talking about here?
Right.
If this isn't a registry, then what is a registry? Looks an awful lot like a registry.
So if you bought or transferred a handgun in Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure the Pennsylvania State Police have a
It's in the not a
registry.
registry. It's in the not a registry.
not a registry
You
registry.
ever see Elon Musk Boring Company? They have not a flamethrower. the Pennsylvania State Police, not a registry.
Yeah, this throws
But anyway,
flames,
that's
but
the
it's not a
short.
thing.
That was the short version, Dr.
That was
Val.
beautiful, by
believe
the
it
way.
or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wrote an article about it years back. So.
I saw it.
Oh, well, very good. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Mhm.
So what the heck were we talking about? Before we got into that, we were talking about
Licenses in your pocket.
Oh, the license
License
is
in your pocket.
right? In order to actually, yeah, Chris was giving very bad advice to somebody.
Well,
If
it
we could
wasn't
just,
advice. I was kind
yeah,
of throwing it out there into the
yeah.
mix so you
But
guys
don't
could cover it.
throw that out there because you don't want people relying on that and then sitting in jail
Yeah.
looking at Philly Chris in the white pages.
None of this is financial
call.
advice, by the way. If it were, you'd
None
get
of
a
it-
bill.
Financial advice? I don't.
Or, oh, my bad.
500 an hour. I'm
Uh,
only 400. Give me a call.
None of this
Financial
is
advice.
legal
One of
advice. If it were legal advice, it would be followed up by a bill, right, Rich?
That's correct. That
or
is correct.
financial.
But I
Same
think the
thing.
ultimate issue is yes, please do carry your license while technically you can present it at the preliminary hearing. To be at that preliminary hearing in the first place, you first got to be charged with a crime, potentially processed, booked, right? Thrown
Right.
into the slammer for a little while. Nobody wants to deal with that. So carry your license on you at all times. Is that fair, Rich?
That's absolutely fair.
And Dr.
You
Val, what
absolutely
would
should
get what would alleviate that issue as well?
Would that be constitutional carry?
That is correct, sir. The
Constitutional
correct
carry
answer to
would.
all problems is constitutional carry. Rich, what'd you say?
Is it correct? I was just gonna say, Dr. Val with the constitutional carry going down south really quick. Oh, what was that? Oh, I gotta go. My
There you
wife-
go.
All right.
I'm getting in my ear. I've got to do transition. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. So, yeah, that is an issue that I think some people misunderstand as well. We're talking that article, not even in terms of whether or not they're going to be stopping people and checking people, but I think the premise for that article is somebody, it's the barber saying, you know, I'm a felon, so I can't carry because of it. I'm just going to wait till constitutional carry so I can carry. Have you had, and even politicians, I think, with ill intentions have raised this argument and said, oh, we can't have constitutional carry because it'll allow felons to carry firearms. Have you dealt with this nonsense, Dr.
Yeah,
Val?
as if they care now about the law,
Well, that's true as well, right?
right? I mean, they're
Well, it's interesting because apparently this gentleman in the article did care, right? Because he was saying, I'm going to wait
Right.
until constitutional carry
Yeah.
in order to illegally carry. He was just a knucklehead.
yes.
You know,
Yeah,
but
we-
have you had
You know,
people-
we hear that a lot, and it's if you're a felon, already a felon, or if you're intending to commit a crime, I mean, you're not gonna. These people are not worried about constitutional carry or getting a license to carry firearms. You know, most of these people are repeat offenders, I would think, and they're probably prohibited persons to begin with. They don't care. They're disregarding the law in order to commit usually another crime. Or they're going to use a firearm to commit a burglar or a robbery against someone, or armed robbery, God forbid, murder, or So if they're it's like Thomas Jefferson said, if they're going to commit this greater crime, they're going to ignore all the firearms laws leading up to it, right?
I'd love to murder somebody, but constitutional carry isn't passed yet, so I can't do
right,
it.
right. You're not going to, You're going to wait for constitutional carry.
Wait till it's
You know,
less illegal. You know.
And the bad guy's like, I'd love to murder all these innocent people, but you're not supposed to carry in the post office.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That would be against the law. I wouldn't do that. Rich, do you think that a lot of people aren't understanding on the anti-gun side that even if they were to do this and carry during constitutional carry, it would still be illegal anyhow? Do you think they misunderstand that that's not the way the law works?
Well, yeah, a prohibited person can't possess or purchase a firearm. I don't care what the state's constitutional carry law is. It doesn't change the federal prohibition against purchase or possession. There's nothing.
Right.
They
If you're a
can't-
person
they
not to
can't
possess.
it. If you're a person not to possess and you're carrying a firearm, again, this may be up for some legal interpretation, but if you're carrying a firearm, I believe that's possession of the firearm,
Right.
which would be a crime.
Well, it's really not up for interpretation. I know you're being sarcastic here, but maybe we should explain to the audience the two types of possession so you understand exactly what you're looking at. It's really not just holding something in your hand. You got actual possession where you're holding something in your hand, and then you've got constructive possession, which is the ability plus the intent to control something. So let's say you sit down on your couch after a long day at work, and you unstrap your holster, you put it on the coffee table next to you. You could be constructively possessing that even though you're not holding it and it's not on your person because you've got the ability plus the intent to control it. You deal with these cases all the time, right, Rich?
Well, yeah, especially when it comes to And usually it comes into play when there's a prohibited person with a non-prohibited person who owns firearms, and they come to us for advice on how do I do this lawfully in my home. And it becomes a problem because the prohibited person, even if it's not on their person, certainly if he's, police come in with a valid search warrant and see the house and there's guns and firearms out in the open, they cause the problem for that person who's otherwise prohibited.
And when you're dealing with a jury trial, of course, they're going to accuse you of possessing it. The elements are ability plus intent. So if you're in that situation where you've got the ability, you're always arguing intent, which is an incredibly difficult argument to make in front of the jury. And basically, I've seen Tim Baruch make this argument before. And he says, my wife's Sex and the City DVDs are in our living room, in our console. I know exactly where they are. I've got all the ability in the world to possess them. I've got no intent to control them. And you could substitute any example, right? My wife's lipstick's in the third drawer on the left in the bathroom. I know exactly where it is. I've got the ability to control it. I've got no intent to control it, and therefore I am not possessing it. The real solution to avoid having to go to the jury and have them decide whether you intended to control something, get rid of the access, right? Because if you got no ability, you can't meet that final equation. So that's ultimately the way a lot of these people have to deal with that living situation. It's under lock and key, where only that person has the combination of the key, or it's on their person. Because if it's on your person, clearly the other person's not possessing it. Dr. Val.
G. Gordon Liddy saying that Mrs. Liddy always had to buy a lot of guns.
Oh, really?
Yeah. For our younger listeners that may not know that this person was a convicted felon, but he would always say Mrs. Liddy owns a lot of firearms.
Unfortunately, people think that that's A, a good idea, or B, okay, legally speaking.
Right.
I've had people say, oh, well, I just can't buy them. My wife's got to buy them. I'm like, no, don't tell me that. I don't want to hear that. Knock it off. You're going to be in a whole lot of trouble.
Right. And that goes to the constructive possession issue you mentioned.
Right. Well, I think that goes even beyond constructive possession. I think these are people who don't understand that the prohibition is on possession. They think the prohibition is just on purchasing for some reason. Like that would make any sense. Like, I can't go to the store and buy one, but I could still have it once my wife buys. No, you knucklehead. That would be ridiculous.
I got it as a gift.
Well, it would be, but it makes sense. Tobacco is one of those things where if you're, now in Pennsylvania, under the age of 21, you can't purchase it. But if you're under the age of 21, you can possess and smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply to the people who are prohibited from possessing tobacco, Rich. That doesn't apply.
I got some confusion.
Yeah, I bet my family members wish I was a person prohibited from possessing tobacco. That would solve a lot of the cigar smoke smell they got to deal with all the time, right?
I bet you we could get your significant other there to figure out a way to make you prohibited from possessing tobacco.
Prohibited from possessing tobacco. I was a bad choice if you don't like tobacco.
So here's another thing that people get tripped up on. Medical marijuana is legal in Pennsylvania. Right.
Very good.
And so I'm going to take medical marijuana. Are you a prohibited person under federal law if you're taking medical marijuana?
And you're going through this hypothetical, right? Yeah, we got to make that clear, Dr. Val, because you're going to be on every news
What are you
station.
trying to tell us about?
You're going to be on CNN, MSNBC. Gun owners of America is going to smoke marijuana.
No.
He says it on. They'll take you out of context, right? They'll
Right.
chop that.
I'm just asking the question. Are you?
Yes.
The answer would be yes. The way
Yes.
Evan Knapp in New Jersey always says it, you could bang or you could bong, but you can't do both. And that's sort of, he says that tongue in cheek. Ultimately, I know that there are people out there who've got legitimate medical reasons, and it seems to help a lot of people in these situations. But unfortunately, if you're an unlawful user of narcotics, then you're prohibited from possessing firearms under federal law. And it's possession that I've had people come over to say, oh, well, I got this, so I can't get a license to carry. It's like, no. We're not dealing with license to carry. It's a prohibition on possession of firearms if you're an unlawful user. Now, what constitutes an unlawful user has been something of dispute between Richard and I and prosecutors all over Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. This is why I brought it up.
Yeah,
And I
well,
believe we have another one of those coming up. We just
we
have
do.
this
We do.
one of those.
They picked the wrong guys.
Because the guy, I remember the consult, we're like, yep, we want this case. They're like, well, you don't have to say anything else, young man. We will. What do you need?
Rock and roll, rock and roll.
are-
So
we are
ultimately, Dr. Val,
insistent.
because it is unlawful at the federal level, regardless of what state law says, it remains unlawful at the federal level. If you use it, you're an unlawful user. Now, do I think that it's a little ridiculous that it's unlawful at the federal level at the schedule that it's at? I mean, I'm not the doctor, Val. You're the
Right.
doctor, Dr.
Yeah.
Val.
Well, I understand. I understand the issue, and I knew that, but I wanted to bring it up because
Well,
we do
I know
get
what you're doing. You're
this question
tossing
from
me a
people.
softball.
They don't understand
Mhm.
that even though it's legal in the state
Yeah.
to have to be taking medical marijuana, but under federal law, it's unlawful, and therefore you're a prohibited person.
I like how you
Once you
say
get that
taking the
card,
medical
it's-
marijuana because it sounds when you're saying taking it, it sounds like medicine, right? The way it's
Yes.
intended in that
Right.
situation, as opposed to smoking dope or whatever else they may
Well, in
say.
Pennsylvania, it's not smoked. It's I think
Right.
it's pill form, right? So
It's gonna be
like
pills,
California,
be
you can smoke
vaporized.
it.
Be vaporized.
Taking marijuana. I do remember hearing people say in high school, some sheltered people say like doing weed, and I always thought that sounded strange. You ever hear
Yes.
somebody say that? It's like, oh,
Right.
that's somebody who's a little unfamiliar, right?
If
We're
you
like,
or
you
let's
don't
put it
do
this
you
way,
don't do any weed. I just want to point that out.
You
to
know,
make
none
you
of
a
us
more
do any.
professional, you've been prescribed medical marijuana by your
Prescribed.
physician
Right.
to address an underlying medical issue, and under state law, you are allowed to do that and have that, and you don't smoke it in PA. But still, by taking this in pill form, you're a habitual user, right? I think that's the word in the federal law. So that would prohibit you, correct, from
It's a
purchasing and possessing a firearm.
unlawful user or addicted to. So unlawful user, if you look at case law, there's a Third Circuit case, which is Pennsylvania, but this case ultimately originated out of the Virgin Islands, which I love that, right? You get the Virgin Islands case that is Third Circuit, and I got a case kicked where they accused the guy of lying on the form because they asked, are you an unlawful user? He said no. Now, the Pennsylvania State Police have this policy that if you're arrested, not even convicted, but arrested of any drug-related offense, you will be denied within a year of that arrest. And that is their policy. They'll deny you. The problem comes when they try to prosecute you based upon that denial. And this is the one that we got kicked because the Third Circuit case law said in that particular case, they found that evidence of one use 6 hours prior to when he was arrested was not enough to establish that he was an unlawful user. So that's pretty close in time, right?
Right.
Hours before.
Right, hours
In
before.
this other case, the gentleman didn't even get convicted. It was ARD or something 10 months before his denial. And because it was within 1 year, that's their policy. They deny.
Right.
And so let's say the denial took place in November. A cross-examination went something like this. So you say that this denial took place in November. Isn't that correct? And the question says, are you an unlawful user? That's correct. Yes. And he answered, no. Is that correct? Yes. But you've got no evidence that he used marijuana in November, do you? No. And you've got no evidence that he used marijuana in October, do you? No. Do you have any evidence that he used marijuana in September? No. And all the way back. And ultimately, the prosecutor at the end, the trooper tried to give him this policy that they had and show it to the judge. And he's like, well, here's the state police policy, Your Honor. Judge, that's not a law. That's a policy that they made up. I'm
Right.
showing you Third Circuit case law that says it's got to be established by an evidence of a pattern, a prolonged pattern of use in order to show that somebody's an unlawful user. And the judge's like, yeah, he's right. That's not a law. This is the case law. Kicking this case. See you later, everybody. And that was the end of that. But I don't mean to give people a false sense of security by telling this story because this guy did not win this case because he had to obviously hire counsel, go through this whole process, get printed in the whole deal, and face being charged with a felony in order to get to this position. Nobody wants to deal with that. And there are a lot of others who are not as fortunate when you get involved in these situations. So That's the long-winded answer to a question,
Yeah,
Dr.
I mean,
Val.
and
If
so
you're
we
an
get
unlawful user.
questions like this all the time. People just don't know. They don't, and other thing, they don't understand reciprocity laws. That it has to be in Pennsylvania. You got to check these things out before you carry a firearm into another state. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. But this is a big one on medical marijuana, and people get tripped up on this. And then if they check off no on the form, they're not an unlawful user, right? I mean, and they have a prescription for medical marijuana, they're taking it regularly.
Right.
Right, and you can
Right.
certainly go back in those filled prescription records and find out how often he
Yes.
filled it. And that is certainly going to be subpoenaed by a district attorney in about 5 seconds. So Mike will be like, "Do you have any evidence he used in October?" "Yes, he filled it at a dispensary." "Oh, well, how about November?" "Actually, he filled it again. Got a 30-day supply." Mike's
Right.
going to eventually go, "I got no more questions, Your Honor. I'm sorry." "Your Honor, they have too much evidence he's an unlawful user." But no, and to say that, Dr. Val, I have to ask that might be, I know Mike and I are familiar, and we do seminars regarding gun law and self-defense throughout the state. Medical marijuana questions have honestly become the #1 question I get in those seminars, bar none, in the last year. And a lot of people just look at me with these, "Are you serious?" "No, I'm going to lie to you." No, yeah, it's a problem. That's a problem. He's like, "Well, it's legal here." And it's the same, Dr. Val, as you were saying. "Well, it's legal here." I said, "Not saying it's don't. I'm for it. If it helps you and it's better than narcotics and opioids and things like that, absolutely." The problem is all good intentioned law has a whole bunch of other laws that race to catch up. And the problem is you change one and there's a whole bunch of other laws that need to race to catch up. And in the interim, people are stuck with those old laws
Yes.
and get in trouble.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important with gun laws is the same way.
Dr. Val, could you speak at all to the schedules and how they work at the federal level?
Oh boy, you'd have to.
Now you're asking him
that's
a
something
long
I haven't dealt with in a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's I'd have to really review that.
Okay. But
Yeah.
as a general proposition, there's some pretty serious drugs that are categorized as less harshly than marijuana, let's say.
Yeah, and there are drugs that are just completely have no medical use whatsoever, right? So like cocaine has legitimate medical use.
Right. So
Okay.
cocaine is not a Schedule 1, right?
Schedule one.
Right. So it's emergency rooms throughout the country have cocaine in it, to stop nosebleeds. It's probably one of the best drugs.
I thought you meant for other reasons.
Right. No.
Those doctors work long hours, Dr. Val. They got long
hours,
hours.
guys.
Those residency hours on medical school, I hear, are rough.
Oh yeah, they are pretty tough. Right. Well, but now we've got CBD, so we got it all solved.
No.
I don't know about all that, but
No, I think Michael was getting at, as we do this all the time, is marijuana is a Schedule 1, which said there's no medical use for the drug
Right.
whatsoever. Right.
Yeah.
And, research has now shown, and it's certainly in dispute, that there are some medical purposes for marijuana.
Right.
It hasn't been
exactly.
scheduled at this point. So
So the law, the regulations and the law have to catch up to what's happening. So the states are legalizing it, but the federal government has to change. The FDA has to change the categorization of the drugs.
Well, I think even when we come to medical marijuana, we take it out of the firearms context. There's a recent bill that I read about in the legislature, because marijuana has not been rescheduled federally. Any amount of a Schedule 1 controlled substance in your system is a DUI per se, no matter how it's affecting you, whether it's impairing you. So individuals who have medical marijuana not only need to worry about their firearms rights, they also have to worry about their ability to drive a car in Pennsylvania, because if officer finds out that you're a medical marijuana and they arrest you for a DUI and say the last time you took it was 4 days ago, that's a DUI. And fortunately, it looks like the legislature's moving to say, no. Somebody's got medical marijuana. You got to show that this guy's impaired. But it's the same principle. We need to try to move all the laws together. I know that's easier said than done, but for every good intended law, there's always 100 consequences legislatures don't think about.
Sure, maybe
And-
make
and
fewer
correct
laws.
me if
Dr.
I'm
Val is getting
wrong.
some of the laws off the books, right?
Freer laws? There you go.
There would be no issue with taking CBD gummy bears, correct?
taking CBD gummy bears?
Well, they're not supposed to have THC in them, right?
They don't
Right,
have the
right.
THC.
That's
Right.
my
So-
understanding.
and
that
they're legal under federal law, correct? I think it was the Farm Bill. of
Farm Bill, the
2018.
Farm Bill, yeah.
Right. Farm
And
bill.
I will
right.
say this: that's one thing that Trump doesn't get any credit for. But another thing that I thought he was being slick, if I'm being honest with you, remember when the Obama administration decided they're just not going to prosecute based on, these marijuana issues,
Mhm.
and a lot of people didn't have a problem with that. Trump came in and said, nope, we're going to prosecute them tooth and nail. If the law is on the books, we're going to enforce the law. It's not our job to decide the law. So it's on the books. We're going to enforce it. And some people took that as, this nasty, stuffy conservative trying to go ahead. And I think that it's a little bit of a stretch to call Donald Trump a conservative. But I think a lot of people perceived it that way. What I thought he was doing was being slick and putting it back on the legislature, saying, listen, if this is going to be on the books this way, then we're going to enforce it that way, which obviously nobody thinks is a good idea. So how about you knuckleheads get your act together and put this where it needs to be on the books? If he was trying to do that, it failed. But that's what I thought. Maybe I was wrong.
It
Wouldn't
can
be
be
the
curious.
first.
You don't want to see that you're soft on drugs as a legislature member, whether in Congress or the state legislature.
But isn't that ridiculous at this point, though?
I think so. I think especially when it comes to marijuana, and I think Dr. Val would support it. I think that the attitude has shifted even in the last 5 to 10 years.
And it's not even we're not even talking about recreational use in this conversation. We're talking about
right. We're talking about medical use.
how about cancer patients who are sitting? How are you going to tell me that giving them a fentanyl patch is that's way better
That's okay?
than
Right.
marijuana,
Right.
right? Give me
Yeah,
a break.
exactly. Yeah, and it's in when I was in the military, it's getting very hard to get convictions now on troops that have the mandatory drug testing. They pop up with THC. I was a medical review officer, and I had a case, and I was the expert witness, and I was in the military court, and the defense attorney, the defendant claimed that his girlfriend in Colorado, when he was visiting her that weekend, baked him brownies, and he didn't know there was hash in the brownies, and so he says, doctor, he said, if there's THC in the defendant's blood, could it got there another way other than smoking? I said, yes. Could it have possibly gotten there through eating a brownie he didn't know about? I said, oh, absolutely, it could have. I don't know how it got there. I just know that it's there in his blood, and he has no other explanation for it. No conviction. He was acquitted.
Dr. Val, you weren't hanging out with the guy and his girlfriend in Colorado with the brownies?
Yeah, it's getting very difficult. This was back 2009, 2010 era. It was very difficult to get convictions from a military jury, a jury of your peers. They just won't do it.
Wow. Wow. That's going back quite a while. Rich was in a different profession and I was playing Little League Baseball, right?
In 2010, really?
Mike's not that young. No, don't let him get started. He just
Now they're
likes calling
booting
me
people
old
out for
guy.
the
That's all.
vaccine. Now they're booting people out of the military if they won't get the vaccine, it looks like.
Oh, yeah. That's an entirely different program.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. We're big on vaccines in the military. They're pretty much all, they're all mandatory if they want you to have it, depending on where you're going to get deployed. If you're worldwide qualified, you got to have a whole bunch of vaccines, and then there's another set for people who aren't worldwide qualified, or not going to run a deployment list. If you're on a deployment list to go places, you'll get an anthrax vaccine because they want you to be, prepared to be against bioterrorism. So if weaponized anthrax hits you, they want you to be immunized before you go down range. So that was my specialty in the military. I was a public health physician. I have an MPH. I was a public health, preventive medicine and public health doc, and also a pathologist. So I really didn't do a lot of prescribing of medications. That's
you
why
don't have medical
things.
expertise with the wacky tobacco, Dr. Val.
Not a whole lot of the wacky tobacco. I did sell my Bob
That's the
Marley
medical
records,
term,
though.
isn't it?
Wacky tobacco. In all those DUI cases, that's what I call it. Can you tell me how much wacky tobacco my client used to leave out in this?
I gotta let you finish your sentence because your thought I'm trying not to laugh over you while you're finishing the sentence. That's pretty good. Wasn't there a story about George Washington and vaccination? Does anybody know about that?
Where he did it in Valley Forge for smallpox to try
Yeah.
to limit the number of troops during that terrible winter who would succumb to smallpox. There was a smallpox outbreak. That was very I'm sure Dr. Val. I'm talking about like I'm the doctor on the
That's
program.
that's
Dr. Val.
that's inoculation. Actually, you know, they inoculated you with smallpox
They gave
underneath the
like,
skin,
shit.
and it had a 10% mortality rate.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know,
Yeah,
isn't it true that I remember as a history guy, he used to take the pus out of somebody's who was infected with smallpox and then insert it into somebody else. So it's not like the science where they weaken the virus; they kind of just give you a little bit.
It was
Excuse me, guys.
right. It was
That's
so
horrifying. That's
it
horrifying.
was so deadly. People were willing to take that risk and deal with a 10% chance of dying as opposed to almost 100% chance of dying if you contracted smallpox. And if you look in the history up in New England, it was actually the Puritans like Cotton Mather who supported mass inoculation of the population in New England. It was actually the religious establishment, the religious people who they saw it as a community duty, and it was the medical people who resisted it. They didn't want right. It was kind of just the opposite of what's happening right now in a lot of cases. Not all.
Was that because the medical people wanted you to come for treatment and pay the bill as opposed to being cured in the first? I got shots to the Puritan doctors. It's
or
okay.
bleed you
follow the
with
money, right?
leeches and charge you for that.
It's like,
you
no,
know.
we can charge you to bleed you out. You're not just going to be, no, we're not. Those Puritan doctors in New England, you got to be careful about that.
Yeah. So yeah, it was really bad. So people were willing to exchange a almost sure death if you got smallpox, you know, maybe 90% plus mortality versus 10%, you know, from inoculation. I may not be exactly correct on those statistics, but it was pretty high. You know, if you contracted smallpox, and it was like something like 10% if you were inoculated with it. So that's how they protect. You know, Voltaire wrote about this too. How in England, the English would protect their children with inoculation, and the French wouldn't. So he just blasted his own country. You can read about it. It's Voltaire wrote about it. So this is not a new debate at all. It goes back a long time.
Wow. How
Right.
did they come up with those inoculations?
I think it's just observation from that. Then they used like cowpox. They started using cowpox, and then the vaccines were developed. You know, the Salk vaccine, the Sabin vaccines were developed. You know, in the 20th century, and then we were able to eradicate smallpox with that. And the reason you can eradicate it is because smallpox is only, it's in the human population. There's no animal reservoir, right? So you can't eliminate coronavirus because it's animal reservoirs for it, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No. Rich, did you have something? Looked like you were piping in. I know I had you both on this program to talk about historical inoculations.
Talk about, listen, my background history degree, we can talk about historical inoculations and history the whole time. I don't know if the listeners really called in to answer to that one, but I'll sit here. Dr. Val, I'm fascinated. I'd sit here like
timely.
just
It's
keep
very
talking.
timely.
I'm interested as well, but I know
Yeah,
I
me
didn't
too.
put on the text blast to get everybody to this program. Come listen to Mike
Right.
G and Dr. Val and Rich talk about inoculations
Yeah,
in George
it's-
Washington's
And,
day.
my history is rusty on it too. You know, I haven't read about it in a good while, but I'd have to go back and review all the timelines and exactly when inoculation happened. Then they started to do cowpox and all that. But
I heard the cowpox story was that they were wondering why they call them milkmaids.
yes,
back then
exactly.
never got smallpox, and they
Right.
were curious because it would run through a town, but these individuals never got it, and they
That's right.
made a determination through observation that cowpox was
Observational.
similar, that it gave them some sort of immunity to the actual smallpox, and that's where they, how's everybody else dying, but you guys are just walking around like I don't know what the big deal is.
Right.
So it's observational because obviously they didn't know what viruses were or any of that stuff. So
You
Exactly.
figure back
Yeah.
then they just accused the milkmaids of being witches and kill them.
witches, right? That's right.
Yeah, back to New England.
Back to New England.
Right,
You always
really.
pick on the Puritans in New England. Yeah, you get that.
Live
Good
free or
deal.
die unless you're
Well,
alive.
I know I've been having a blast with you fellas. I really hope we can do this again soon. Rich, do you have any parting words that you want to leave with our audience before I cut you loose? I know you owe the little guy some ice cream.
do. You're gonna make me broke, man. We gotta get with clients. I got a lot of ice.
What's the matter? Your boss doesn't pay you
Yeah,
well?
you're not paying him enough, Mike.
Oh, you're trying to be smart. He's not here. He's
Ah,
upstairs.
okay.
Okay. Are you on the phone with your boss? No. Any parting words? No, I think what it's important to realize through this conversation is the importance of voting. I think that's what Dr. Val has gotten through.
Yes.
That the voices are, she said yes, the way our voices are heard isn't necessarily through demonstrations and protests. That's certainly important. But the way things get done is to vote your interests, vote representatives who share your values, share your interests to the legislature. Because at the end of the day, that's how things change and that's how things get done. I mean, banging your head on a wall has a purpose, but most of the time you just get a headache. So it's important to do what is important and vote your interests into the legislature. You see honest change. And two, I think and I think we all preach this, is education. You got to learn what the law is, what you can do and what you can't do. And especially when you think you can do something, make sure you can actually do that. Medical marijuana, I think, was a great discussion we had this evening. Like, well, it's prescribed. I'm okay. Doctor says it's prescribed. It's legal. I can go down to the store, the local dispensary, and get it. I'm fine. Not realizing they could land in a whole lot of trouble if somebody make their life miserable. And then all of a sudden, as Mike always says, I don't know. And you go in front of the judge. I didn't know it was illegal once I had this medical marijuana card. You go, you know now, as they're putting on those silver bracelets that everybody likes.
Right. And if I had to rank order in priority, the number one, elections, number two, legislation, and the third thing, always last, sorry guys, litigation. Okay.
Hey.
And really, because we don't want to get it to that point. We want to have it. The only way you get the right legislation like constitutional carry pass, which avoids the litigation problems, everything, is through electing the right people. So this is why we need to get involved in primaries, right? I mean, so that it's not just any Republican or any Democrat or any, right. It's the right person for the job who's going to support our constitutional rights and advance our constitutional rights. We do that in the primary because we want to pick that right person to run in the general election. So hopefully we will be getting involved in a number of primaries in the state.
Absolutely. And I think that goes right hand in hand with what Rich said about voting your interests. You got to figure out which of these guys actually do share your interests, guys and gals, right? You got to figure out
survey them.
who's the real one, who are the real ones, and who are the phonies, because there are a bunch of phonies out there, and you don't want to be giving those folks jobs. Well, Richard S. Roberts Jr., the other half of the Justice Brothers, and Dr. Val Fennell, Colonel Dr. Val Fennell.
Right.
You got so many titles, Dr. Val. You're such an accomplished man. Historian of inoculations.
Yeah, right. This week, yeah.
Director of Gun Owners of America. Thank you both so much for joining us. We look forward to having you each back on the program soon. This is really a blast, gentlemen. I can't thank you enough.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mike. Love to have you. Love to be back whenever you'll have us.
Absolutely. Have a great evening.
Take care.
For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. Well, that was a lot of fun, don't you think, Philly Chris?
Yeah, it's fantastic. No, those guys are great.
That was excellent. I was so wrapped up in the conversation, didn't realize how late it was getting.
Hey, it's all good. No, it's a wealth of information between the two of them and yourself, and it's some cool stuff we talked about.
We do have seminars coming up. If anybody's interested in coming on out and checking out a U.S. Law Shield seminar, we've got not only seminars that I'm teaching. I've got Lower Providence on Saturday at 4:00. We've got Mountjoy Sportsmen's Association on Sunday at 1:00. Archery Addictions at 6 p.m. on Monday. And Kempton Rod and Gun Club on Tuesday at 6:30. Rich Roberts is going to have Sportsman's Warehouse in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg area on Sunday the 3rd at 2 p.m. He's going to be at my home club, Harrisburg Hunters and Anglers, Thursday the 7th at 6:30 p.m. He's got Port Clinton Fish and Game Association on Sunday the 10th And then he's going to be back at the Sportsman's Shop for Gun Owner 101, October 13th at 6:30 p.m. So maybe we could put that calendar out there for our listeners.
And still gunlawseminar.com, right, Mike?
Gunlawseminar.com. The Gun Owner 101 classes won't be up there.
Mm.
So Gun Owner 101, that's going to be October 13th at the Sportsman's Shop, 6:30 with Rich Roberts. That will not be up there on gunlawseminar.com. But that looks like it's the only 101 in the foreseeable future. So everything else should be up there. And just in case people were wondering, those are the ones that he and I are covering. I should be there on Sunday. So we should be good on that.
Cool.
Let's see how many, man, got a train. The comments are just a freight train.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of good comments tonight.
And we didn't pop in.
Hmm.
Randy says, keep pushing, Dr. Val, here in Luzerne County. It's around 2 weeks. And Jeremy says the Constitution doesn't exist on weekends and holidays.
Yeah.
Stacks Farm said GOA greater than NRA. Rita says you guys keep feeding up. I'm watching on YouTube. And I guess
I think we're
back and
just
forth.
talking.
It's freezing.
Stack says primary them, yes. DG talks about the weather. Eric says Mike G taught us well in York County. Thanks. Well, thank you, Eric. Thank you for always being a loyal listener. DG, it's all politics and the fear government has put in people. What else we got here? Jeremy, we really need to get rid of these Republicans that don't want to support our rights. Absolutely. That's the name of the game here. Okay, Scott asks, if constitutional carry is passed in Pennsylvania, what would happen to reciprocity with other states? Should PA still offer a license to carry firearms if reciprocity stays in effect? The answer to that would be absolutely, 200%. And I don't know of any states, other than perhaps, I don't know that Vermont has a licensing scheme at all, but other states that have gone constitutional carry maintain their licensing scheme. And for that very reason. So you can continue to have reciprocity with other states. Rita, if someone has a license to carry from more than one state, do they have to constantly carry all of them, even though they aren't traveling out of state? Well, the answer to that would be no. If one of those licenses is honored in the state that you're in, then, so for example, if you're in Pennsylvania, you only need your Pennsylvania license. If you've got Utah and Arizona, you don't need to carry those in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania is the only one that matters. Now, if you're going out of state to a place where you need that Utah or Arizona to lawfully carry, then yes, bring those licenses. Scott says, are you an unlawful user or addicted to? I believe I said it word for word. Word for word, Scott. He had to turn a few people down for training when they said use medical marijuana. Eric says, it's for you would have a single day seminar in Harrisburg or even Philly. I would be there. We should definitely do that. Eric, what you might want to do is come on out to, we're going to be doing the Oaks, Philly, Chris?
We should.
In October?
Yeah. That's
the Toys for Tots.
You emailed me about the other day.
We got to start airing that commercial because we're getting close here. But they're doing a huge Toys for Tots over at Eagle Arms with the Oaks show coming up in October. We're going to continue to promote that because we want everybody to participate.
Yeah.
Definitely a good cause.
Come on out. Stop by.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Philly Chris, I'm going to let you take the reins for a minute. Mike G's going to take a brief break, okay?
Okay. Sounds good. Enjoy. Righty.
So, all yours.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, brother. I'll see you soon there.
I let you do the whole program, right? You survived.
Yeah, this will be a piece of cake now after doing that. Yeah.
I'm going to come back. I was just getting started. Mike, you didn't know I had a guest lined up because I only get guests when you're not around. That's all.
I had been working on the guest before you had reached out to me, just so you
know. That is such a lie.
No,
you ever watch Maury Povich? You ever watch Maury Povich where he does a lie detector test to see if somebody's cheating on their significant other?
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me get these glasses here. Maury Povich, right? All right. Philly Chris says he was going to get a guest when Mike G was on the show. All right.
Here we
the
go.
Results are in, and that was a lie.
That was you are not.
You are not the father. Oh, I told you.
Russ is the father.
Russ is the father.
You what now?
We'll do it live. Do it
Do
live.
it live. Oh,
Yeah.
is there a new We'll Do It Live? I don't know if we want to show that.
What?
Remember that?
Oh, is there a new one?
Didn't I send you the new We'll Do It Live?
I don't know.
Maybe
Liberty.
I missed it. I don't think I
Liberty,
saw
you
that.
sent it to me, didn't you?
Oh, who was it?
It's Grant Stinchfield.
Yes.
Maybe we don't want to show that. I don't know.
Oh, on the
He had
Newsmax one
a
you're talking about?
He had an
Yeah,
on-air
yeah.
you did send that
moment.
over, yeah.
I've been
We'll call
on
it-
with that guy a number of times, though.
we
He's
will
a
call
great
it a
guy.
moment.
Great guy.
Yeah, he went a little bit over the edge there, didn't
He
he?
had an enough moment.
Yeah.
He's got fed off.
He
Yeah.
got fed up.
We all,
Thing-
hey, it happens to the best of us, right?
It's happening a lot more these days too.
Yeah,
Tell you
well,
what,
they've
I
got-
never get fed up.
As,
Never sick and tired of what these leftists are doing to our country.
as Billy Chris points out all the time, like we'll send random videos. I think I was at a store when there was like a scuffle and people were like,
Yeah.
almost punching each other. And Billy Chris's same response always: "It's a crazy world we live in now.
It
It's
is crazy.
only getting worse."
Oh boy.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong, but it's looking
I
that
was
way,
not
isn't it,
prepared
Liberty?
for that.
What's that?
There we go.
good.
Mike turned off his camera, and your face was
Okay,
split.
so step away for a minute.
That's
Well,
okay.
maybe we can
Our
talk a
stream
little
is
bit
derping out
about-
again.
What's that, Russ?
Our stream is derping out again. It's been doing this off and on all night.
Yeah, I'm looking
It's
at it
like-
on my phone. I follow along so I can kind of look at the comments there just in case they're not legible
Yeah.
or the delay and all that. And looks like it's been coming in and out. But
Yeah,
right
and
now it
Twitch
looks like
is-
it's working, which is good.
Twitch is still like, I don't know if it buffers or whatever, but it still has like all four of you guys still on the screen. I don't know what Twitch's problem
Yeah, I
is.
noticed that. Yeah, we're like
And,
traveling through time here.
I don't
Twitch
even,
is twitching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twitch is
Going on.
tweaking.
Twitch being twitchy.
So what was on
Well-
your mind, Billy Chris?
Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about the border crisis. It's interesting when Mike and Val and his one employee there that we had on were talking about, the laws that are being enforced at the federal level. I mean, of course, right now with what we're seeing down at the border, they're kind of selectively choosing not to follow the federal laws there. So I'm sure everybody's seen the video footage coming out of the border crisis, and Kamala's basically not even around, and it's become clear that Joe hasn't even gone down there. Did you see the reporter asked the other day,
I did.
Patty there, whatever they're calling her, about
Yeah.
whether or not he's been there at all? I don't think he's been to the
And
Mexico border, even when he was the vice president, which is pretty
Yeah,
wild.
she said ever.
I think so. I don't know if that's confirmed, but I think she said
Peter
she was-
Ducey, he's the one who's really
Yeah,
he
Peter,
goes
yeah,
after her.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. So maybe she's going to circle back at some point, but she's probably just not going to circle back at all.
But she's buffering.
Yeah, right. But it's sad to see that. I mean, I personally can sympathize with these folks are coming from areas that where it's rough. It's a lot different living situation, and I know some people. I've talked to some people who have made that journey, and I get it. If your family's in danger and you're trying to flee the cartels, let's say, down in Mexico and make a life for your kids. But obviously there needs to be a legal way to do it. And, I think what we're seeing right now, in my opinion, I think other people are saying this, is just a complete course. A lot of these people are going to be voters and eligible to vote, and they're supposedly busing and flying these people around to different areas of the country where their vote could make a difference. So, a lot of global change going on. So what do you think, Liberty, from what you're seeing?
You ruined the show already?
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost everybody. We're down to one person.
Yeah, I mean, I was really watching Jen. I actually watched the entire conference as I was working today. I just had it in the background of Jen and a couple of her other ones, and I just noticed how now she's using the legal route, right? Donald Trump was saying that the
Yeah,
whole
exactly.
time. He's like,
Yeah,
I want a
right,
big,
right.
beautiful wall, but no, I want a wall, but I want a big, beautiful door that they can come in legally.
Sure.
And it was so funny when she was pushed up against the wall, her back against the wall. They were really questioning her. What did she go to? She said, well, we want them to come legally. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, sure.
that
Yeah, they're
sounds
saying
familiar.
it's closed. It's
Sounds
obviously closed,
awfully familiar.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
deja vu.
It's mind-boggling. And their
Right.
own, just one other point was that their own a lot of the Democratic reporters are really pushing back on her about, they want something. It doesn't. I'm not sure. Did you gather that they almost want a different kind of system for the Haitians coming in versus it was just strange. They kept questioning her on that, and she was
they're obviously not
uncomfortable.
checking to see if they've been vaccinated. I mean, in New York, you can't even go into a restaurant without proving you've been vaccinated, yet you can illegally cross the border and camp out and then, get on a plane with American citizens and have no vaccine or proof
Bunch
of
of
it.
hypocrites.
They're
though.
not wearing
I
masks.
did a
Right. Yeah. I
program
mean,
on this. It might have been my first or second time even doing this program, but I listed quotes from 3 people about illegal immigration, how it's an issue.
Mhm.
And I believe that I asked if any listeners would call in and guess who made all 3 quotes because they sounded like Trump quotes, to be honest with you.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Chuck Schumer.
Mhm.
I believe is what it was. So they've been saying these things all along. It's just when Trump was in office, anything he said, they wanted the opposite, right? Did you see the latest news coming on down the road?
Are they
Let's do
Democrats
this
or
first.
contrary?
For those of us
I
just
think
tuning
Scott
in-
was hoping that you'd give me a few more minutes if you need to do anything.
Oh, it's that.
No, I'm just kidding.
Now's the chance for us to talk about all those things.
He didn't even mention aliens.
Yeah, well, we're not there yet. Then maybe later in the show.
Yeah. For those of us just tuning in, you're listening to Mike G in the morning with The Law Matters, only on the Freedom Station, WFYL. Have you seen the latest in the news?
What was that? What?
That could be anything.
What's
Mike.
this?
What is this? Hang on.
Oh my gosh.
Am I mirrored?
Keep-
Am I
no,
backwards?
keep-
That's
holding
fantastic.
it,
Where
Mike.
did you get that?
What's that?
Obama's
You can-
revenge. You were cropped.
see it.
You were cropped. I fixed it.
Okay,
Obama's
you can see it
revenge.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, put it in front of your face so
Yeah.
everybody can see it, because I think that's
No,
like,
it's fine. It's fine.
like hold it up to the screen because YouTube is like up higher. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Up higher, up higher.
Refuses to rescue Biden's president.
Obama's revenge.
Yeah.
This is
So
a
what's in
reputable
that?
publication here. Sold at the
That might-
checkout line at grocery stores all over the place.
Well, some of those things seem to be more accurate than the mainstream media now. You
The
look
Sun.
at them, they seem to be.
Would you really be surprised though?
No.
I mean,
no,
unfortunately, right?
Right. Yeah. Although, are we considered mainstream media? Like when you hear that term, it's funny because everybody on Fox will use it. It's like, wait a minute, aren't you also mainstream media? What's the definition of that exactly?
So I did want to go back to what we were discussing at the beginning of the program. We were talking about these businesses and vaccines. There's a Q&A posted on one of these employment-related sites. And the question was, how should an employer respond to employee requests to guarantee insurance coverage or acknowledgement of liability for adverse reactions to the vaccine, including immediate or future disability claims and payment of company life insurance in the event of death?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the answer would be? Because, I hear about these people where the company is saying you must get the vaccine or leave. And I say, well, if you turn around and say, if I have any negative effects, will you pay me $100 million? Of course, they're going to say, absolutely not.
Right.
So my response is, are you saying that if I die, my life is not worth $100 million? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Right.
I'm supposed to just take this, and if I die, then tough.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's likely to happen, but if they believe that it's not going to happen, then that should be a safe bet, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a good argument. Yeah.
I think
absolutely.
ultimately, no matter what it is, and we're not just talking about vaccines, I'm talking about anything that's forced upon somebody. If you're going to force somebody to do something, ultimately, if you face any kind of adverse consequences as a result, then they're not going to be right there with you, are they?
Right.
And Liberty
course.
makes this point all the time that, even when we were dealing with the pandemic itself, you were saying that people who went out there and would make light of the virus, you said, well, if you end up getting it, they're not going to be the ones nursing you to health. So you got to make your own decisions and take your own precautions how you see fit.
Right.
Same thing goes for any type of treatment or anything. What do you think their answer is to this question, Philly Chris?
Whether or not they would do that.
It-
Whether or not they,
well, it says, how should an employee respond to employee requests?
how should they or
Yeah.
will they? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they, looking at
Would-
this, I think they'd be much more successful if they did have something like that. And they said, listen, we know there's some risks here. The VAERS database proves that. So we would do that for you. Maybe there'd be
Ah.
a set of them. That might
But-
be reasonable. I think they'd get more people vaccinated.
But
right?
do you think that's the advice that they gave?
No, I'm sure not. I'm sure it's
Wh-
not.
what do you think, Liberty?
I mean, aren't their own vaccine companies like immune from getting sued?
Right.
Yeah.
So the employer is going to be like, "Don't look at me."
Right.
Well, that's pretty much dead on. So
Sure.
what it says here is the answer is employers should not respond to these types of requests. So don't respond at all. If the vaccine is required for the job, workers' compensation will likely cover any illness or injury an employee experiences
What do you
from an
mean
adverse
likely?
reaction. Since the vaccine-related illness or injury arose out of or in the course of employment. Additionally, OSHA's Emergency Temporary Standard, ETS, which is expected to be released in the upcoming weeks, may release employers with 100 or more employees from some or all liability for any adverse vaccine reactions, as these employers will be required to mandate the employee vaccination. So if the government tells you got to do it,
Yeah.
and OSHA comes out, makes this temporary standard, then you're off the hook, pal.
That's what they'll do.
This is to further discuss issues related to mandatory vaccination programs, protocols. All right, never mind.
Have you guys seen the newly released Veritas videos? Did you guys get to see those?
Yeah.
The
was
I
whistleblower.
saw
Sent it by
something about it. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't one of them just some low level. I don't want to, not saying that it's no big deal or anything like that, but I don't want to overhype anything as if it's the policy because one person in the organization says
I
something.
understand what you're saying. Yeah. I think, yeah.
It'd be like, let's say the delivery boy for Gun Owners of America came out and said something stupid, and people are going to look at Dr. Val like, Dr. Val's a bad guy.
Some of the doctors are in the video. You can hear them talking to that nurse and all. And,
Oh,
I
really?
think it's revealing of what's probably really going on behind the curtain. But you make a valid point. It's not like the head of the organization was caught. And some of these people obviously have questionable ethics when you hear them to begin with, which you're going to have in every organization. But we're dealing with quite a significant situation related to COVID and all that. So
What do you think about these policies and everything like that, and the advice that's being given to people and the fight that they're facing? Don't you think that it really just boils down to the idea that nobody else is looking out for you, man? Like,
well,
you
pretty
got to
much,
look
yeah,
out
you're
for
right.
yourself. You got to
Yeah.
look out for your family. You got to
That's
do what's
right.
best for you and your family because nobody else is going to look out for you.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump
Unfortunately.
really had it right in that respect, right?
Yeah, and I think unfortunately right now the government's looking out for, certainly not for us as citizens of this country. They're changing the way things are significantly, and I think over the next year, several years, we're going to see things in this country we never expected to see. We've already seen that, so it's only going to continue. So, yeah, your
What's
point's
going to
valid.
happen next, Philly Chris?
Well, I don't know. I don't know for sure.
This is
but,
your
I
time
mean,
to
it's my
shine.
time. You ready, Scott?
Come on,
Scott's
yeah.
still
Oh,
there?
come on.
I love how you always get
Oh,
shy on
Lord.
the air. You talk my ear off
Yeah.
for years about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And we get on the air, you're like, I don't know, man.
Well, I certainly don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but based on the trends and what we've seen, I mean, look where we are now, and look at what's going on in Australia. I don't think we've talked about that yet, but I'm sure our listeners and others have seen the videos of the police in
Tell
the
us what's
streets.
going on in Australia.
From what I've seen, the police are out in the streets and they're basically running after and tackling and arresting protesters, protesting the vaccine requirements over there. They're having major lockdowns. It's my understanding that you're required to stay at home, and they could literally send you a text message, and you have to send a picture back, showing where you are. And if that location doesn't match where they say you're supposed to be, they'll dispatch the police to your home. They're shooting rubber bullets at protesters in the streets. So it's getting pretty tyrannical over there, in my opinion. I mean, we haven't seen that happen here yet, but what if that starts to happen here? How are people going to react, right?
Hmm.
Have you guys seen those videos?
That's Billy Chris.
Yeah, there you
Just tell it like it is.
go. Well, I mean, that's what's happening. So, I mean, it could
No,
happen
it's-
here, you know?
It's scary. You
Um,
sent that video.
Yeah, I mean, you
Are
can't.
are the Australian people okay with this? Or
Well,
is the
no.
makeup any different than the United States, where there would be some people who are like, yes, we need that in order to contain this pandemic?
I think there's some people who are okay with it. I think, unfortunately, there's too many people who are probably okay with it, which is how they're getting away with it. I mean, there's groups of several hundred protesters out in the street, you know, similar to what we saw here in Philadelphia, but they're quote unquote more peaceful protests than I would call what we saw here. But they're getting arrested because they're exercising their right. Well, I don't know exactly what the First Amendment is like over there. I suppose they don't have it since that's our
First Amendment.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
You would think it's the God-given inalienable right of freedom
right.
of speech, right?
Should be,
It's
but
not
they
the
don't have
First
it.
Amendment, so to speak. But
Yeah, they don't have that because, you know, well, there's some videos here in the doc if we want to take a look at any of that.
Doc.
Um,
Oh, there's a video of Philly Chris in the doc. I put one in there for later too.
oh, you did? Oh,
a
fantastic.
video
Well, it's not
of
really Philly Chris, but it's Philly Chris to me.
Oh, sure.
Hey, I
It's
don't
been
know. I
2
mean, you
hours
know,
since the
the-
program starts. Let's just bring up the doc.
Yeah, bring up the doc, Russ.
No,
Let's play a video.
Jeez, what do
well,
you guys
the-
want from me?
I wanted
one
to
in
ask Billy
there-
Chris this because I know he was around when this happened, maybe.
What
But
was it?
What is
were
the
you
Civil
around?
War?
Were you around for the polio? Wait, maybe I'm
I
totally
was
off.
in
the
my
cr-
50s then, Mike.
Billy Chris, were you around with the whole polio vaccine?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I think
Maybe
that,
it's
yeah,
a
that
little
was- that was-
before you.
Yeah, it was a little bit before me.
Because
Yeah.
a lot of people keep bringing it up. I actually had a question for everybody. I guess like a lot
You
of
should
people.
have asked Richard Roberts. Apparently, he's a
Yeah, right,
historian
right.
when it comes to
Oh,
vaccines and stuff
That's
like that.
true.
Should we
Well,
call
I
him
was
back
just
up
curious because
again?
a lot of them bring up and say, well, nobody pushed back when it came to polio and these things. But do you ever remember a time when like people were losing their jobs over
The
not getting
polio
it? Like
vaccine was
adults?
developed in the early 1950s.
Well, that's when Philly Chris was. You know?
Yeah, yeah, that was like my college days.
But was it ever like? But was it ever like this where they like I know for college they made you get certain things that maybe like was it tetanus or something, you know, but it was kind of required, I think. But a lot of people bring up other vaccines and say how come nobody pushed back for those vaccines? But I think it's because the facts are so changing with this. And
Mhm.
have you ever seen people like getting fired over this type of thing and just mandated? You know, that's the question that a lot of people are pushing back with, I guess.
Has anyone
Yeah, I
What's
don't
your
got,
think
thoughts?
so. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. Right?
has,
Yeah.
So I want to bring up something more recent. Has anybody gotten fired over like the H1N1 vaccine when that was a thing?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Let's bring
What
another one.
about
like
what
that.
about that first SARS that was in like the early 2000s? I was in early grade school, so I barely remember it. But you know the first SARS that came around. Was there any pushback? Was there any hey, if you don't get this, you're fired?
Mm-hmm. Well, something's going on because even like coffee shops, things like that are putting up signs. I've seen that they're closing early due to employment shortage. I've heard a lot of business owners saying that they cannot hire people. They cannot get people on board to be hired. I'm seeing people on that Nextdoor app posting that they need jobs.
Sure.
Something is not matching. So something, you know, if this is Biden's America, it's actually pretty scary. You kind of couldn't even make it up. I mean, look at the border.
Right.
Look at COVID, look at the mandates, look at everything going on. What is next?
Yeah,
And
go Liberty, go.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
And the question is, it's almost, I actually had a Philly Chris thought today, randomly, that was what, you know, it does seem like it's staged. Like it's set up for Donald Trump to come back. I mean, you could not fail more miserably. You know, the Democratic policy has not worked.
What do you
Sure.
mean it hasn't worked?
I mean, Biden
They're
said he
doing
would have this under
exactly what they
control.
want.
Yeah,
trying to
I mean, it's set
run
up
America
like
into the
we need
ground.
Donald Trump back. I think even like some Democrats are probably
No,
thinking.
the thing is, I don't know if we need Donald Trump back. I think we need anybody but Joe. I'm running for the anybody
Right.
but Joe
Yeah.
ticket.
Well, I think the people that are
Benedict Biden.
in power are not going to let that happen. I think it's very unlikely that we're going to see that happen. I think it'll be Joe for a while and then probably Kamala. And, they're going to continue to manipulate the elections. Listen, I was out yesterday in Philadelphia, and I've never seen this in the suburbs. I've seen it multiple times now. And I was approached by multiple people who asked me if I'm registered to vote. I mean, there's a lot of things going on that add up to where we are right now. I mean, you don't see that in the areas where there's more conservative voters, but they're putting tons of money, people on the street, literally in multiple shopping centers I was at, where they would just come up to you and see if you're registered to vote. I mean, if you're going to try to get more registered voters who just
The
so happen
numbers
to become,
game.
yeah, it's a numbers game. And, we're still hearing things about the Dominion systems,
What did you say to them? How did that interaction go like?
I got their information. I talked to them about how much. I got all kinds of information. They're making like $20 an hour to walk around and register as many people as they can to vote. And this has been going on for months. So, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think people should register to vote. But it's interesting how our tax dollars, I would imagine, it's like called PA One Vote. I have the information. I'm going to look into it a little bit more. But I was kind of intrigued at this behavior and what it means and why it's happening, who's behind it. So another thing going on in Philadelphia, too, is if you go to a lot of the major shopping centers, you can get a free phone. They'll just give you a phone and service, which is interesting, too. It's sort of like those Obama phones. You just give them an ID. I mean, they've offered me phones multiple times. I don't know exactly what that's all about. Certainly, it's nice for people to have phones, but who's funding that? Taxpayers, I guess.
What's all that about?
Yeah.
I want to see if they try to give you a phone, Philly Chris, what you would say.
I've talked to a few of them just out of curiosity.
How many phones am I allowed to have? Because the thing is, I don't need a phone, but B, I could probably use a phone as like cameras.
Basically, if you make less than $100,000 a year, they said they'll just give you a phone and free service. Now, I would question who's monitoring that phone. Whose phone is it? What are they doing with the information being sent through those phones?
Dr. Val
He's in the
posted up
chat.
something. We got it. Yeah.
Oh, Dr.
Correction.
Val in the chat.
Inoculation had a 0.5 to 2% mortality rate, considerably less than the 20 to 30% mortality rate of the smallpox disease.
Oh, okay.
All right, just correction.
Thank you, Dr. Val.
All right.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah.
Smallpox under the skin.
So when they ask you if you're registered to vote and you say no and they collect your information, is it because they want to vote for you or they actually want to register you to vote?
Well, I'm sure they would never admit to that, and they shouldn't be doing that, obviously, as we know. But we know that things, just with the recent elections there in California, how many people were talking to the media live about them showing up to vote, and their vote was already, somebody already voted for them, basically.
Yes.
So
the People's Republic of California, right?
Never happened.
No, it didn't happen.
Never happened.
Narfador, we can't talk
As
about it.
glorious as North Korea that state is, right?
You're just saying, imagine if this happened in a movie, right?
Right. It is a bad movie.
Feels like a movie.
But who knows? Maybe next we'll see some food shortages and possibly some power outages and things like that.
Okay, wait, no,
right
no,
on.
Can't wait for that Green New Deal.
You can't just casually throw that in there and move on with the conversation. What'd you say?
Well, it's starting to happen in other countries. They're starting to experience some food shortages. So it's not that it's happened here yet, other than these runs we've seen, caused by the pandemic. But there are supply chain issues going on.
Supply chain, right?
Yeah, and that could continue to happen. Also, I did notice recently that the shipping cost for things coming from China just went, it's about 5 times as expensive now for businesses here to ship things from China. So, that's part of the reason the electronics are.
Well, is that good or is that?
That's bad for us as
awful.
Consumers because there's going to be.
Doesn't that sound in line with Trump's agenda? No.
It doesn't
to
make
reduce
it
those costs.
Right. What's that?
Well, it's bad because we're paying the companies here. Like, let's say you're an electronics retailer buying components,
So
computers.
we're totally dependent on them
Yeah.
for these. Well, maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe
It's
we gotta
bad for
start
us.
making
Yeah,
them
a
in
lot of
America,
this
right?
stuff is bad for us, and the oil prices. I mean, I expect to see, the inflation.
You understand? You
continue.
do understand what I'm saying, though, right? that
Go
if there's
ahead, what was
something
that?
coming from China
Right.
and it's becoming too expensive to have it shipped from China,
Hmm.
and you have an American option. That's
Well, there's no
roughly the
American
same
option
There
price.
is
for a
no
lot of these
American
things.
option.
I
That's
understand.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Now I understand what you're saying now,
Gotcha.
but you understand what I was saying, right?
That if there was another option here, it would be
If
better.
there were an American
Sure.
option, it
Yeah.
sort of levels out the playing field with China using their slave labor and manipulating the
Absolutely.
currency. That
Yeah.
sounds like a very Trumpian sort of idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, and that could be a good thing if there's alternatives, and also it opens up the opportunity for businesses here to get into those markets. But we're talking about things like, microchips that require, enormous facilities, a lot of technology.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah,
But
just some other
would it
things
be a
I've been
good
watching.
idea for us to start to maybe wean off of the whole China thing?
Yeah, maybe.
That'll
right?
take
Yeah.
years to go. Mike,
Maybe
that'll
let's
take
not
years
have
to
all of our
actually
medicine in the
accomplish,
hands
though.
of China.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
That'll
So,
take
I mean, yeah,
decades
that's-
to accomplish, Mike.
What's that?
That'll take decades to accomplish because the supply chains aren't there. I believe.
All right, so
I
let's
believe
just-
it was
let's just not do
Intel.
it then. That's right. You're right.
Well, follow
Yeah.
the money trail. There's so much
Yeah, let's
corruption.
just,
We're hearing now that
Let's
there's
continue to
confrontation.
rely on China for everything.
Yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
Well,
It's too hard. It's too hard. I
Mike.
can't wake up on time or start the live stream on time. It's too hard. It'll take decades for me to start at 7 o'clock.
Hey, Mike, you remember that? You remember that thing they wanted to stick up your nose for that test? I have a suggestion. I'll let you use your imagination to fill in
Manny
the blanks.
McMahon, the producer.
Oh.
Yeah, I was Manny McMahon.
Philly Chris was onto something though that I did hear
Gilbert,
a
the
report
producer.
on Fox that there's going to be they said a toy shortage around the holidays, and also I think going back into another toilet paper shortage.
Mm.
So I just gave everybody a warning there.
Yeah.
To buy all the
Hey,
toys and toilet paper.
I have a PSA this week. I have a PSA. Can we go over that real quick because it does have to do with shortages. So
Absolutely.
I remember learning in school that I think it was during World War I or World War II, they had these things called victory gardens, and basically in order to ease the demand for food, you grew your own food. Perhaps we should bring those back.
Mm. I think it's a great idea. Well, a lot of these parks.
Then
they
we
should
can
have
all
fruit
eat
trees and
healthier
Gardens.
instead of the crap that they have at the stores.
Mhm.
And it costs a lot of money to be healthy these days.
Yeah, that is true to a degree, and it's not easy. If you're on the road all the time and you're
Mm.
not somewhere where you can prepare things, it can be difficult
Sure.
to find a healthy option.
Why aren't there fruit trees planted along the highways? I mean, seriously, right? You could pull over and grab an orange.
Oh, they said that. That actually somebody said that
Yeah.
because it can help with the homeless.
It would be great for everybody. I mean, we could have a healthier society.
Yeah, they
instead
could
of just
call them
like, I
commie
mean, why
trees.
wouldn't you do that?
Except some people would take way too many fruits.
Well, if you had apple tree, I mean, if they're trees, so you could just keep planting them, planting
Yeah.
a bunch of orange apple trees. I think there's a
Philly Chris
reason that
Appleseed.
isn't set up that, So you have to go to the grocery store and buy the perfect apple that's been waxed and polished, and 25% of the
Those
ones
are
that
made out
don't
of
look
wax.
nice, like they'd be in a commercial, have been thrown away. That's what happens. We waste so much food.
Do you have a deal with the guy at the grocery store where he gives you the ugly apples?
I think there are places that do that, yeah. But so much of
Yeah.
it gets trashed. Yeah,
I
it's
could
sad.
see Chris doing that.
Yeah, let's do it.
The blemishedApples.com.
Getting to blemish the
Yeah.
fruit and
Well, it's like all these restaurants that throw their food away. They're worried about getting sued, but I believe that's not even
RejectedApples.com.
the law. That you can give it away. So,
Well, there's liability with something like that, right?
I think
'Cause
there's
it's-
some protection regarding that, though. I believe.
Oh, is there?
I'm
If
not
you
the
gi-
lawyer.
If
Yeah,
you give it away, then there's immunity.
I believe there is. Yeah, because I think I saw a documentary about that, and they said it's.
for some reason the
yeah.
comments are a little bit behind, but now we're getting in some comments flowing in about our previous topic, which is or kind of the same topic, but vaccine and polio and all that.
Mm.
People know more than what we were saying.
Go ahead, read Scott's comment.
Scott said, if I remember right, Liberty, the polio vaccine was given as a pink sugar cube to us little kids in school. Difference is polio vaccine made you immune from polio. COVID vaccine doesn't. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. It's in the details, right? Some of the
Right.
details keep changing. And also DG said something, but I don't see it on the
Do they
screen.
not have breakthrough polio cases?
Oh, do I have to scroll up?
Yeah, can you scroll from you?
I don't think you
She
could because
said-
it was
okay,
a real
DG
vaccine. This
said
isn't a real
the
vaccine.
polio vaccine had its same serious side effects, but no one talked about it. It was just the way it was back then, a different time.
Oh,
That's what DG said. People do not want the vaccine or wear or wear a mask at work all day, that is the unemployment problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I believe it was back probably winter of 2020, maybe early 2021. Wawa and various other food places or convenience stores were doing this thing where they'd give you a monetary incentive upon hiring or even just showing up for an interview. And there'd be another monetary incentive to get the vaccine. So they'd give you like $500 for showing up to an interview, and then another $500 a couple weeks later after you prove that you're actually going to show up to your job and prove that you have the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And
When was that?
this was a while ago. I don't think they do it anymore.
A lot of companies are giving money out. I saw in the news.
You just
that,
went on interview. Russ made a living for quite some time just getting interviews at Wawa.
Well, that's probably why they stopped.
That's what it is. Like, he just said a key point there. He said if they show up, that has been the key. I've talked to so many business owners, and they
Because-
said that people
if
are
it
not showing
required
up.
Russ to show up, he wouldn't have got the $500 anyhow.
Yeah, I
Shut
saw
up,
an article
Mike.
about that too, and because people were saying it's their turn now to blow off the employers. In the past, the employers would just stop reaching out to you once they decided they didn't want you. So it's like a employee market, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, most likely by design again, right? All these things that are happening
Yeah.
all at the same time that are not good for our country.
Yeah, things have not gotten better. We'll just put it that way, as Joe had promised.
Mhm.
So, but of course, he's going to blame the unvaccinated on everything.
Sure.
Oh, it's like blaming Trump. It's just that's just their new lightning rod for blame from the left is, it's the
Yes.
unvaccinated's fault. Well, that's
And
great.
I can
I
see-
got both my vaccines. I got one in each of my middle fingers. Is this joke old yet? I don't think it is.
I truly think it's coming though that doctors are gonna some doctors are gonna require that for patients. What do you think, Chris? Because I'm getting that feeling. I don't know if I can say a personal thing, but
What was that, Liberty? I missed what you said. I'm
do
sorry.
you think that it's gonna be coming more and more that doctors, like primary care physicians, family doctors, are gonna be requiring people to be vaccinated in order to be seen and treated, things like that?
I hope not, but it's possible. I think that's the way we're headed. Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I think
seeing
we're going to
a-
have a health crisis too. I think that people are really losing faith in our medical system based on all of this. And, there was a Navy commander that came out the other day on Tucker, and he was talking about that VAERS database. I mentioned that a few months ago where they're tracking the complications. And that was mentioned in some of these Veritas videos. And 50% of all the complications in that database, and the database has been in existence for 20 years, 50% of the complications that are in there, and from what they're saying in these Veritas videos and other doctors who have come out are saying a lot of the things are not being tracked, but 50% of the complications are from the vaccine. And this was a Navy commander who's trying to stand up for his troops and say that they shouldn't be forcing
this is
the
getting
vaccine.
kicked
on
off.
people.
This is getting kicked off of the air.
You think so? Well, I'm
Yeah.
saying what they say.
We're
you know?
getting kicked off. Thanks, Chris.
Well, we should be able to talk openly,
This
though.
is an incredibly popular
yeah,
episode.
You told me not to hold back, so.
Nobody will
Well,
ever say. Oh gosh, that's got to be all out of all the wild, crazy things that you say to me all week.
Yeah.
Having nothing to do with these potential strikes.
Yeah.
This is where you.
Oh, that was off of Fox. I just saw him the other day. I think I have his name in here somewhere.
But I am just curious how people are treating in the healthcare field are being treated. Like, if anybody in the comments has any comments about that, about if your primary care physician or anybody you've seen has been kind of getting on you about did you get vaccinated, and kind of giving you that, like pushing it on you, making you feel you kind of discriminated against, kind of like you can't eat here if you don't have the vaccine.
Yeah. You're hesitant. You're a
Is that
non-vaxxer.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah, can't sit here.
Can you just tell them that you are?
Oh, there's
You can
there's
identify
new
it.
terminology.
Yeah,
there's
I
vaccine.
identify.
Yeah,
There's
a card.
vaccine
actually.
resistant and vaccine hesitant. So there's two different terminologies that the Democrats are using
Ooh,
now.
they
So
all gotta
hesitant
label
means you're on the
things.
fence and you still might do it.
And resistant,
Resistant means heck no.
yeah.
Mm.
And so what if you got it? Then what is that called?
What if you can't get it?
You're good.
What if like, because I don't know what the what the medical situations would be that you couldn't get it, because I'm not versed in that stuff. I'm a producer, allegedly. But what if you can't get it? Is there a category for that? Is there like
Yeah.
the vaccine non-compliant? Like what would their
Yeah, they're
label
using
be?
terms like that.
You know.
Labeling is the key to division, right, Chris?
That's right.
For labeling
Divisiveness,
people in these
Yeah, this has been done
categories.
before. I mean, I think we're just seeing history repeating itself. A lot of this
Absolutely.
stuff going on. In my humble opinion, since I've
So
been
what,
on the
what
earth,
else
like,
is going to
Russ is
happen,
behind?
Chris? What else is going to happen?
well, I think if these things continue, we're going to see changes to the country. They're going to make us more in line with the rest of the country. We're no longer going to be a world power. We're already seeing that happen now. The things that this puppet in the White House has done to the country with our allies. The way he left Afghanistan, the way he's dividing the country even more. I just think it's not good. And if more people don't stand up to it, we're going to head in that direction. And by the next few years, we're going to look back and wonder what the heck happened. Not going to be the same.
Remember Chump? He's like, "You're the puppet. You're the
Yeah.
puppet."
Right? I mean, does anybody think this is going to go well if it keeps going this way, right?
How about Clinton's the Clinton campaign lawyer being indicted?
Oh, yeah.
Durham?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I was hoping we were going to talk about that. Yeah.
It's interesting, right?
I have concerns I've mentioned on the show in the past about the currency. We're seeing these cryptocurrencies and the Federal Reserve doing some pretty wild things. There's this great reset.
Do you think they're going to
that's
cut the knees out of the cryptocurrency? Because that's a concern for
I think they're doing that. Yeah. I
with the
think they're doing-
powers that be don't
Mhm.
like it, don't like the
Sure.
competition, and then one day it's just gone. You got these people who've got so much invested in it, right?
Sure, they could. It's really, it's its own type of fiat currency in a way. I suppose it's different because they're limiting it, supposedly. But, the U.S. dollar, certainly on the world stage, is not doing well. And there's talks that Russia and China might start trading oil off of the U.S. dollar, which is the only reason the dollar has value right now, once it went off the gold standard. So we have the OPEC dollar being attacked right now. So, yeah, I don't think people's 401ks and their retirement funds are going to be worth nearly what they think they're going to be worth in a few years if this continues, and they won't be.
And what happens to the dollars that people have in the bank if we switch to a different currency? Does it just get converted?
Well, there's talk about equity with that. That's a great question, Ross. From what I've seen, is depending on your, let's say you're, white versus African American, you might get 80 cents on the dollar, Russ, versus somebody else who might get $1.20. There's talk of them doing that.
Great.
I'm not saying that's definitely happening, but they're talking about things like that. Equity.
Who's they?
People controlling the monetary system, the Federal Reserve, people in the Federal Reserve, and
The IRS.
other people in control of monetary policies. So,
They've specifically said that.
yeah, I've seen things about that. Yeah, I'll have to do go back and pull
You're
it
gonna
if
have
you want me
to.
try
You're
get
gonna
it
have
for
to
the show,
come
yeah.
back and
Yeah.
back that one up.
Sure. All right, we'll talk about that in the future.
Is that
They're getting rid of private property rights. That's another thing we're seeing right now. There's parts of the country where they're voting to change the way the suburbs work. So if you own a nice single family home that you built out in the suburbs, I think there's parts of California that just did this. They now have changed the zoning so you could come in and build an apartment building in the middle of a suburb neighborhood. So these are things that over the next few years we're going to see change the complete structure of the way America operates. I have a friend up in Boston who has a beautiful property, 2-family property in Boston, and it's all paid for. And if he goes to sell it right now, due to the new zoning requirements, he has to go to the local township, the zoning, and offer it to them first. He can't just get a realtor and sell it privately. Like, these are a lot of things going on behind the scenes that are going to change our way of life in the country if they continue. So this is why I mentioned some of this stuff, because it concerns me. I don't want my kids to grow up in a country where they no longer have their freedoms and, the opportunities that capitalism has to offer. we're definitely
Mm.
becoming a socialist country if we're not already. And what's the next step on the world stage?
Communism.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to get that gentleman. I think Liberty, you said you were talking to somebody from Venezuela. Was it?
Liberty muted.
We'll do it live.
Oh, I'm here. Yeah, it was
You're
actually
hanging out with Ross
Brazil.
for a minute.
It was Brazil.
Okay.
And they actually put a limit. He was saying that they put a limit on how much money you can have in your bank account.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
well, there you go. Well, you guys saw the article, or there was something in the news recently where they're going to start tracking everyone's bank accounts, any transactions over $600. Used to be around 10,000.
Why over $600 though?
Because then they can control everything you're doing, and they can look at every transaction in or out of your bank account. Yeah, I mean that's not right in my
They
opinion.
can't
It's-
already do that? I mean,
Well,
ever since the
they
pandemic,
could, but
cash
they
has
haven't
basically been
been.
outlawed.
Mhm. Well, this is another reason people are going to the cryptos, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about all that crypto stuff, because let's say the United States bans it. What do you do with crypto after that? You have to spend
Well,
it
they can't.
elsewhere.
I don't think they can effectively fully control it if it's on the internet and you have access to it. But they could make it illegal, I suppose. Yeah. But probably what they'll do, they're working on these social credit scores behind the banks. The financial institutions are working on these social credit scores, just like they have in China for each of us, and
Right.
that will dictate, a lot of things about your life in the future that we've never seen happen here in the United States before, based on how much they may loan you or how you can use your money and where you can live and things like that. I mean, I'm not saying
So
it's
it's your
definitely gonna
prediction
happen.
that there's going to be a forceful redistribution of wealth?
It's looking at if we keep on these paths that we're on now.
How long?
I mean,
How long? Because we're running the pool here, okay?
I think that within the
We
next,
got like the Super Bowl pool.
I don't know for sure. I mean, a lot of these things are gonna. I
Oh,
think.
cut,
depend-
don't get wishy-washy.
Yeah, but
Come
you're trying
on.
to box me into a corner. I think a lot of it will depend on how much people stand up to it. And I unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't think enough. What's that?
Worst case scenario.
I think the next 2 to 5 years we'll see some of these things being implemented. Yeah.
5 years, there's going to be a redistribution of wealth. And then
He's writing down his
best case scenario is it never happens, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
It'll
Yeah,
happen
people stand
sometime
up to it.
between 2 years from now and never.
Right. But I think a lot of it is going to hinge on how people respond. But
At what point will you know that the response has overcome the possibility?
a lot of the things, when I make my own personal judgments, I look at human behavior, psychology, for example. I have some sales experience, and I can read into things quite a bit just based on people's behavior, right? So look at the mask thing. This is why I've stood up to the mask thing. How many people are wearing masks, yet our government, as far as I know, has not provided any real scientific evidence to show that they really do anything? Is there, and I'm putting this out, we're on the air right now. Somebody come to me and show me a scientific empirical study in a medical journal that shows empirically with, multiple standard deviations beyond the regular mean, okay, that there's a statistically significant difference that masks do something for COVID. Because that, as far as I am concerned, doesn't exist. The only thing I've seen is to the contrary. So why are all these people being obedient to this nonsense, right? If we want to talk about science, and I think we've seen Fauci flip-flop back and forth. This is the highest paid person in our federal government who's supposedly looking out for our safety, right? Yet is forcing masks and these vaccines on people when there really isn't science to support it. So I think that if we look at that and people are willing to do that, they're going to be compliant with a lot of these other things.
When you say nothing, it's one thing to talk about whether the virus is small enough to get through materials, right?
Right.
That's one thing to talk about. And it's another thing to talk about the argument that if somebody's coughing or sneezing, that the virus wouldn't be propelled as far with a face covering or some kind of mask, because that's a completely separate argument, right?
It might
Well,
even
yeah, but I
bounce
think
off the
that's
mask.
not a scientific argument, because if you're in the same room with somebody, it's in the air. It's whether, these are particles, just like the guest I had on the week, you guys, you were off. he came in that suit, the OSHA suit in the video,
Mhm.
and that's a sealed environment. You know, that's protection. That's improved by OSHA. You know, he goes into these labs and facilities. Outside of that, these standard masks, N95s do something. Like outside of the N95, I'm talking about people using these plain cloth surgical masks that right on the box come from China and say they're not medical.
They're not
devices.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I'm talking about,
deal
by the
with
way.
that.
I-
Okay.
The N95s are different. That's outside of this. They do filter a certain amount of the particulates. And I see, you know, I've been in stores where, you know, I've been approached by people working there who have bandanas over their face, and they're telling me to put a mask on.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, wait a second. You're wearing a piece of cotton over your face. That's, you know what I mean?
That's like
So
using a
it's bunch of
chain link
nonsense.
fence to keep mosquitoes out.
Let me ask you this, and I'm just asking questions here. I'm not
Sure.
no scientist or anything like that. So you're saying that the virus is aerosolized and just stays in the, because you said once if you're in the room, it's in the air.
Yeah, I mean,
Is
and
that
they
what you're
did it,
saying?
you know, Fauci finally even acknowledged that. So we've heard that from him after they said it wasn't, then it is. And I don't understand how he wouldn't have known that, since he's directly tied to some of the funding at the Wuhan lab now.
So the last known position is that it is?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how
Well,
far can it
6
travel?
Well, the 6 feet is not based on science either. Somebody show me
Okay.
that. There's no scientific evidence to, you know, and
So
that's
how,
nonsense.
how many
right?
feet does it travel?
Who knows? It depends on the way the air is moving. I think there's too many variables. There's no metric for that. That could be scientific, right? In my opinion, based on what I've seen. You know, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not saying I know all the answers here, but looking at it for myself personally, I'm responding to your questions. And I think a lot of other people would agree with what I'm saying. I've talked to other people who do, who are much smarter than I am. But anyway, so that you know, I think this is, if we look back at history, and we've seen governments go rogue and get out of control, and Trump's talked about the deep state. If they wanted to change the fabric of America, these are the types of things they would do and seem to be doing. Right? So where are we going to be in a few years? Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from anybody?
What do our listeners think? Anybody want to comment?
DG says, Philly Chris, when the aliens land, get on their ship and let's see where they take us.
Yeah, maybe I've done that already, DG.
Is it an
Look up to-
abduction if you go willingly?
Yeah, who's to say I haven't done that yet?
I just
Just
think
a
it was-
ride
I've got a
along.
question for DG.
DG.
Maybe she can answer through the chat. I know that you've promoted bars of soap in the past for hand washing,
Not this again.
Mhm.
and you've gotten Mike G on the bar soap kick. Do you know how to make bars of soap? That is my first question. And I guess I don't know. Is the stream still behind with the chat?
Yeah,
Because
there's been a lot of
I
problems
have
with
no
the stream
idea.
tonight, yeah.
I think DG was behind for a bit, but then she caught up, and I genuinely don't know, but I do have a follow-up. Do you know how to make soap, and can you carve it into the shape of a president's head? Well, I remember years and years ago I saw one of those commercials. You know how like you can buy those special, you know, anniversary coins or whatever, and you know they're like plated in gold, and you can order like a maximum of like 20 of them, and it's for a limited time. Well, they were doing that with like Millard Fillmore shaped soaps, because he was the first president to be able to take a bath in the White House. So they had these soaps carved in the shape of Millard Fillmore. That's
That is
what he's
fascinating.
famous for, having a bath in the White House.
got no answer from DG about.
I think the
making-
stream is.
I
don't
think
know
the
that-
stream's behind
think
Russ
I-
on the
'cause I'm
screen. It's
looking
even
at
I
it.
think the
I don't
stream's
think it
broken
is.
because Dr. Val has said the same thing like 9 times,
Yeah,
unless
right.
he's got amnesia.
Yeah,
Dr.
well,
Val keeps
he said
showing
it
back
under a
up
few
and-
names. He said it on the YouTube chat, and then he said it under GOA Pennsylvania. He said it under V Fennell. I don't know what's going on with Val. He says I feels bad, man.
I
Oh man.
that?
A little choppy.
feel
tonight.
bad. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know why he's saying that. I
Wait,
guess.
where's this? Because I'm not seeing this.
Have you tried looking at your screen?
Look at the screen.
Oh, Dr. Val feels bad, and that's what gotcha. He feels bad, and that's why. It really wasn't. I'm not looking at this stat and be like, oh my goodness, Dr. Val, you're way far off.
I don't know.
The fact that
It
I have a
wasn't
question
close
for
to
DG though. I have a question for
close to
DG.
100%.
Do
Well,
you-
I know, even if it wasn't
Seems
100%, the bottom
Twitch
line is
working
that
fine.
they were taking this thing that they were giving them saying, there is a chance this will kill you. Just, right?
for which vaccine?
We're going to give you this inoculation. It may kill you. So you might want to text your wife before we do this.
May include deaths and thoughts of suicide.
So it is up to date now. So DG must have just disappeared.
Well,
DG.
it looks
Yeah,
like
DG.
Twitch is doing fine. I don't know about YouTube. My brain doesn't work all the time.
I wonder if
the
DG would
computer's-
believe in aliens if someone like Neil Armstrong came out and said they exist.
I don't know. No one called.
Oh, there we
the
go.
mask.
DG's back. Mike, ask her your question again.
Do you
I
know
think,
how to
I
make
think
soap?
DG's like 5 minutes behind at least.
We're having some technical trouble tonight. It's either trying to take us off the air.
Calls
happening.
and
And she's gonna find out about my soap question like 5 minutes from now, right? It'll be tomorrow morning. We'll be off the air. DG will be hanging
Yeah,
out.
right.
Yes, I do know how to make soap. As a matter of fact, I do.
Masks
Dr.
are an
Val says
interesting
masks
debate.
are an interesting debate.
So should we just add Val to the call again and
Yeah.
just
And look,
Bring it
by
back.
the way,
Val doesn't only talk about gun laws.
Bring
Okay?
the doc back on. All right, yeah, he's so versatile. All right.
I think he can just join if he wants to because
you
he's
can
still
just
in the
join back
group.
in if you want
and
to.
I'm not
Debate
telling
it out.
anybody
on any
to.
episode.
I'm
Is
not
that-
telling anybody. I'm not telling anybody to wear one or to not wear one either. I'm saying
Mhm.
everybody has their own personal choice. That's how I feel about the vaccine. But it is an interesting debate, and I think that's a good point that Val makes because the science isn't concrete on it. So why are they forcing it on everybody?
Well, I was just gonna say one quick thing before he comes on was if they're going to use that type of science, right, Pilly Chris, for the masks
Made
to push that, then they better use that same kind of science for this COVID immunity if you've had COVID. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they can't use perfect. It's perfect science when it comes to that. It has to be perfect, but with the masks, it can be, semi-science.
Well, only 6% of the deaths listed in the VAERS database have COVID listed as the only cause of death, by the way. So 94% of things listed in that database have comorbidities. So I find that troubling too, because when they're throwing these numbers out there, like look what's going on
Oh, I
in
don't believe the
Australia right
numbers at
now. I
all.
looked at the death numbers because we were going to be talking about this today. 4 people, I think, died yesterday. They were all in their 80 years old or higher. Now, that's horrible. If they died from COVID, that's tragic. And this is a pandemic, whatever. But they've got the whole country locked down. You can't leave your house. They're arresting people for going in the street with signs. Like,
Wow,
that's-
Australia sounds great.
Oh,
Right?
Dr.
Can't wait to
Val's
go
back.
there.
Hey,
This is like a WWF wrestling where
This is fantastic,
Dr. Val's
right?
coming down the ramp with a
I
chair to
can't.
get Billy Chris.
Oh
me
man,
out of here.
I don't know how I boloed, as we'd say in the military, those statistics. I'm like, something just didn't sit right with me, and it just comes out. I guess I'm getting like Joe Biden or something like that.
I mean, I think ultimately the bottom line is they were getting this, and while they were getting it, this could kill you, right?
Right, the 1% risk is really high, right? And compared to now, I mean, it's like compared to like the COVID vaccines, right? It's very 1 to 2% risk of dying from an inoculation or variolation, putting smallpox under your skin, compared to 20 to 30% dying from the illness. It's still the same issue. It's just like I got too many things up here in the brain, it just crosses over. I probably confuse it with Ebola or something like that. You know?
I mean, I think the principles. I know you want to be precise as a doctor and everything
Right.
like that. If I had, Billy, Chris, can you hang tight for a second because this was
Oh,
the
yeah.
emergency line.
Emergency line? Yeah, sure. No problem at all. Perfect timing. It's good to have a real doctor
Give me
with us
a
anyway.
couple of seconds. Don't
Yeah,
do too
yeah.
much of that, will you?
All right.
We
Yeah.
So
finally
the
got
DT
an
said
answer
everyday
from
masks are not
DT.
working or the virus would be gone. Okay, so go guys, debate the mask.
Were you listening, Dr. Val? Were you listening to the
And
past like 20 minutes or so?
A little bit, but
Yeah.
like right at the end, what were people talking about?
We were talking a little bit about the masks, and I was interested, in your thoughts because you had commented on the chat
Yeah.
there about it, that it is still a debate. And, we were talking kind of about where the country's headed, where things are going, and, what we've seen with the pandemic and all the possibilities for the next several years with our country if these things, continue. And personally, I don't tell anybody else what to do, but I don't see any real empirical scientific evidence to support that the masks make any statistically significant difference.
Yeah.
But I'm not telling anybody not to wear them either. But
Right. So I think with that, this I'm kind of more up on than smallpox statistics. But the thing
Look
is,
at me.
we had actually, Mike, we had a case in Virginia that I was an expert witness on with GOA, and the range in Virginia had a filtration system, and it was used HEPA filtration.
right.
And we argued that successfully that because the range had laminar flow, and you're at the range, you're kind of like in the stall yourself, and there was laminar flow of the air, and because the HEPA filtration,
Kind of like on the airplanes. It's
right, it
theory
could
to the
filter out
airplanes,
the virus, and
right?
and this is some people don't understand about N95 masks. They say an N95 mask is like 95% efficient at removing particle sizes at 0.3 microns, right? So that is actually the part, that's the dimension on that N95 mask that is where it's least efficient. So the mask is efficient for smaller particles and larger particles.
Interesting.
So they
Okay.
could filter out viral particles. It's actually, so it's not like the chain link fence and the golf ball going through it,
Right.
because there's different types of forces besides mechanical forces that trap those small particles, and it's when those two forces are where they converge that they're at the weakest. So an N95 mask, it's weakest at 0.3 micron.
Let's see if we can get it back.
How long will it take to open it back up?
I just opened OBS and hit start streaming. So
Cool.
maybe like a few seconds.
Yeah, and we don't have to go
Do you
real
have the
long if you need to
patience
go,
for that?
Dr. Val, at any point. But
No,
it'd
that's
be a
okay.
good
I can back
conversation to wrap
if you
up.
want me to back up to talk about
I
something?
mean, I'm fascinated because you have the
You know what
background to
you're
really
talking-
talk about this.
You know
Yeah.
what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right,
All right,
yeah,
guys.
it's that the
Guys, we're back.
when I was an expert witness on that case, I really investigated this quite a bit.
Yeah, I did see a study that just came out.
Wait,
Be coming for our country if we continue on the path we're on. And one of the things I've personally been concerned about, obviously with the COVID stuff, is, I'm not really about wearing the masks. I haven't really worn it throughout, and it's a personal thing. I'm not telling anybody else what
Right,
to do.
right.
To my knowledge, I haven't gotten COVID. I've been out in the public. If people don't want me in their business, I say no problem. I'll shop somewhere else. I've traveled to Florida several times where, the masks aren't really an issue down there.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen empirical science evidence to show that they really do that much. And I think it's more about the political stance and control and manipulation of what's going on right now. That's my personal opinion. I think some people.
Yeah, I
would
mean,
agree.
and just to to back up on the mask in case it got cut off. I mean, with the N95 masks, like they're rated at 0.3 microns. That doesn't mean that it doesn't filter things smaller than that, and it actually is where it's weakest. So it does filter things smaller and larger much more efficiently. It just that's where the mask is weakest at 0.3 microns. It has to, in order to meet those standards from NIOSH, it has to be 95% efficient at filtering 0.3 microns. And cloth masks and surgical masks will stop the droplet transmission. So in other words, when you go achoo and you blow your snot everywhere, it's probably where they got 6 feet, because probably travels around 6 feet.
Right.
And it will be effective in reducing that. But aerosolization, surgical masks aren't going to do that. You have to wear an N95. And I think I made the point that unless you're fit tested for the N95 mask, like they use a saccharin saccharin solution. If you can smell it, that means the mask isn't fit properly. So you're going to be breathing in whatever. And but if it is fit properly, you won't be able to smell the saccharin solution. So in a hospital environment, everyone, if you're going to wear an N95 mask, you have to be fit tested, and it has to be documented in your employee file that you have been fit tested. Because if you're in a patient's room that has tuberculosis, then you're gonna actually wear one of those masks, and you want to be able to adequately protect yourself.
Right.
So the thing with the masking is it's not designed to stop
Sure.
the disease. It's designed to mitigate, right? And so that's what they're trying to do, is kind of mitigate and lessen the transmission. It's not going to be 100% effective. I mentioned people don't wear them right? So I think you mentioned a guy with a bandana, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is I see people, they wear the mask and their schnoz hanging out the top of it. I said, what's the point? Just don't put it on.
Even the politicians are putting them on the podiums where everyone's speaking. Like, so if there's any droplets while you're talking, then they put it back on their face. So to me, I think that there could be evidence to support they even cause people to get sick because of
well, I mean, it's they're disgusting. People that don't clean them and they're disgusting,
right?
But I think the point they're trying to, in a hospital environment, right? So we're always taught if somebody's come in, they're sick, you put a surgical mask on them, to keep them from getting other people, contaminating with droplet contamination. And then you would put an N95 on yourself, right? So, and in certain situations, or you have to put them in a negative pressure room or an isolation room if they have tuberculosis with the right, airflow patterns in the room so that, it doesn't escape, right?
Right.
But, when you're talking about that's a hospital environment where things are pretty well controlled. But in a classroom of a bunch of kids,
right?
Get it.
Right. It's they're going to wear them. They're not going to wear them. Their nose is going to hang out. They're going to be taking them off, and so it's like compliance is really the big problem with masking. Is that and it's not just necessarily voluntary compliance. It's just they're not doing things right when they put them on.
Sure.
And I see people like last year, it drove me crazy when they had all the mask mandates, and it was okay if you had your nose hanging out.
Right. That's right.
I mean, come on, man. It's like Biden says, "Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Man. Come on, man."
Right.
So you're saying that if you wear the mask on your head like a hat, that it doesn't work?
I guess not, right? I mean, so it's like in medicine, you talk about the difference between effectiveness and efficacy and efficaciousness or effectiveness. It's different, right? Under experimental conditions and real world conditions, things are completely different because of the variable. So so they're trying to. I understand what they're doing. It does make some sense, right? But on a practical level, and there's the compliance is low because people aren't going to wear them right. And so I'm kind of the opinion with this whole thing with epidemics and pandemics, they go in waves, right? So in 2009, I managed the H1N1 pandemic in Los Angeles. I was the public health emergency officer at the Los Angeles Air Force Base, and I was part of the federal interagency working group to handle the H1N1 pandemic. We were very fortunate
to come back on and talk about that.
It was very fortunate that pandemic was not as serious as we thought it would be.
Right.
And we had this is interesting. We actually had discussions at this time about quarantine and restriction of movement.
Okay.
And whether we were going to do that or not. And the discussion that was around it was, no, it's probably not going to fly, and it's probably not constitutional, is what people were saying way back in 2009, before the internet.
Interesting. But they were having those conversations.
Right. This is what people were saying. Is like, yeah, it's probably unconstitutional, and
it's Obama administration.
Right. This is what and we did at LA Air Force Base. We did restriction
to do all this. They just didn't.
We closed the gym. We instituted some social distancing. That didn't last very long because we figured out it wasn't as bad as we thought, and we were very fortunate And then the vaccine rolled along, about 6-8 months later, and we were kind of out of the woods even before the vaccine came. So, but this is, coronavirus is different because it's a novel virus to human beings. So, influenza is been with humans a long time, and influenza, when it becomes a pandemic, it's because it goes through an animal like a pig, like swine flu, H1N1, or bird flu. And then it changes. It goes through what they call antigenic shift as opposed to an antigenic drift. And that antigenic shift makes it a somewhat novel virus, and then that causes a pandemic. So that was the H1N1 thing. Now with coronavirus, the difference is this is new to human beings, so we haven't seen it, right? So it's going to take time. I think we're already there. That it's endemic now. This is going to in the human population,
Right.
And it's going to be eventually in a few years, probably like flu,
Like a flu season, yeah.
right? But it takes time for us to build immunity as a population. Between getting people who have gotten the natural infection, natural disease, and those who have been vaccinated. Those are the folks who are going to have immunity. And usually, most of the time, if you got the disease itself, you have better immunity than with a vaccine.
And those studies have come out now. The one from Israel that shows, I think there's two. One says 13, one says 25 or something like that times is effective.
Right. And it makes sense. It's kind of like, chicken pox, you have lifelong immunity to chicken pox, but the thing is that you get the disease, right? And there's different levels, types of immunity in the body. There's cellular immunity and there's humoral immunity. And you pick up the extra component of cellular immunity when you get the natural infection. So it's I actually watched a TED Talk about polio vaccine in Africa, and they've switched from the live polio vaccine, which you can actually get polio from. It's rare, but you can get polio from. And they went to the shot, to the IPV or the parenteral shot. You can't get polio from that because it's an inactive vaccine. And they switched in the United States too, because your chances of getting polio from the live virus vaccine was more than than actually the risk of getting polio itself, right? So so they switched they switched to the IPV, to the vaccine, to the shot. So they did that in Africa too. And the problem is all-cause mortality in children has increased since they shifted to the shot. And the reason is, and this is the hypothesis, is that by giving the live polio vaccine, they stimulate a lot of cellular immunity in these children who are susceptible to so many other things. So it's not the same thing as in the United States, where your risk of getting polio is more from the vaccine than it is getting polio wild type. It's all the other things, so it actually helps challenge their immune system. And that's kind of the same thing when you get coronavirus live, right? You get the alpha variant, you get delta variant, you should have better immunity. It just makes sense, right? Because you have that cellular component to the immunity. The problem is like a guy like me who has a lot of medical problems, and as we get older, we rack them up. It's like you're rolling the dice, right? So you can get very mild COVID, or you can succumb to it. I lost my cousin in Erie to COVID a few days ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I'm going to go up there for the funeral and on Sunday. But it's just because he was older, and he had a lot of medical problems. He had the vaccine. He had the Pfizer vaccine, which is less effective than Moderna against the Delta variant. But even with somebody,
he had the vaccine and died from
it
COVID.
happens. And but when you have a lot of medical problems, you may not get a good immune response when you get the vaccine, right? So so the public health looks at the averages. It doesn't look at like each individual person. They say in the population, we compare those who've been vaccinated and those who've not been vaccinated, and they determine the incidence of the disease in both of the populations.
Right.
You know, right. So that's kind of how it looks like on average.
That's what bothers me about the way they talk about this. How they say it's safe. Sure, it's safe statistically for most, but there are, on an individual level, you can't guarantee. And
No, you
That's what
can't.
scares. That's what scares
that's why
me
I have
too.
a lot of trouble with the way, we talk about that on the show. To have
Yeah,
that
right.
presented. Yeah.
Yeah.
And me too. I just want to say, because if you're that one person,
Mhm.
Right.
it's very scary. And I've kind of been there with something in my life. And when you're that one person and they don't listen,
Yeah.
so these generalizations are really scary in the healthcare industry, in my opinion.
Like, if we're all in this together, like they say, then why can't we
Mhm.
be adults and say, listen, there's some risk here. You could be the person that dies from the vaccine,
right.
gets the
Yeah.
the heart problems, or be like that 15-year-old boy that just came out the other day who's got heart condition now.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's like 1 in 200,000 or something like that. For myocarditis. So so they should be disclosing all this. Like, I just got my flu shot at the VA, and they give you the vaccine information statement, and your VIS has all the risks. When you get the flu shot, all of the major risks, and what are the from getting the vaccine. They're supposed to watch you for 15 minutes, and so you don't have an anaphylactic reaction. So it's like anything else in medicine. Vaccines are a prescription or a drug. There's a risk and a benefit to it. And
Right.
so, but on a public health has a different set of ethics and rules than the practice of medicine. And they're actually not the same. So
That's a good point.
Public health does not have the.
Yeah, they don't take the Hippocratic Oath, for example.
Well, it's the three thing. It's called the Georgetown mantra in medicine. It's autonomy, beneficence, and non-malfeasance and justice. Autonomy, beneficence, and justice are kind of the three principles of medical ethics. And the old joke is and these three remain: autonomy, beneficence, and justice. And the greatest of these is autonomy, to parallel 1 Corinthians 13. So there's this issue of autonomy, to be able to make your own decisions. That's in medical ethics. In public health ethics, the concern is the health of the population and reducing the burden of disease, and perhaps even a significant infectious disease that could kill a lot of people. So if you go back to the Greeks, there were two temples. There was the temple of Asclepius, which was medicine, and the one of Hygeia, right? And so the public health personnel are devotees in the Hygeia's cult, and physicians are in the cult of Asclepius.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So
Do
and there,
you want to give a little bit of
I'm a dual
background for,
devotee.
if anybody's unfamiliar, is there any summary that you can give of that so they know what you're talking about?
Yeah, so Hygeia was kind of the goddess of equivalent to public health and hygiene. That's where the word hygiene comes from.
Yeah.
And Asclepius, that's like you see that the serpent that goes around the pole, and that was the rod of Asclepius, and there's the god of physicians, right? So those are kind of the two. They dealt with different things. So one's kind of like public health, that's Hygeia, and Asclepius is medicine, or the practice of medicine. And now we see the two butting up against each other right now, because you have the principles of medical ethics, the autonomy, beneficence, and justice, and then you have I mean, to me, that's a truncated view of medical ethics, but that's what it's come down to. And then you have the public health ethics, and which public health is not really concerned about an individual as much. I'm not saying it's completely out of the picture, obviously, because they do say, well, if you're in public health, if there's a contraindication to you having the vaccines, for example, if you're allergic to any of the ingredients in the vaccine, then you shouldn't get it. Everybody agrees with that, right? Public health people, medicine, doesn't matter. But it's more concerned with how do we reduce the burden of disease in the population, whether that is infectious diseases or chronic diseases. Because now, before COVID and H1N1, we were talking about pandemics, but the emphasis on public health in the country has largely been centered around chronic disease. Reducing the smoking rates in population.
Yeah.
Right? It's so that we don't have the burdens of heart disease and cancer and things like screening for cervical cancer, the various types of screening strategies. A lot of public health centers around that. What's the best type of screening strategy in the population to reduce the burden of, human papillomavirus? And then that's why the HPV vaccine came along, and they said, well, you can get this vaccine, and then, it would reduce the chances for cervical cancer in a woman when she hits 30 years old, right? So I mean, so there's kind of two different perspectives, and they overlap, but they're not the same. And so we're seeing that conflict being played out right now. And of course, in America, where we have a tradition of independence and liberty of the individual, we see that philosophy coming out in everybody. Like, you can't tell me what to do, and right. And but you look at countries that don't have that history, like in Asia, and the government says mask, and everybody masks.
Right.
You've noticed that, right?
Yeah,
sure. So
That's
right. So
true.
it's a different mindset. And in Korea, they were able to South Korea, they were able to not shut down because they caught it. They had a test right away. People were compliant and they masked, and they did aggressive contact tracing. And so they were able not to shut down their economy. And part of the problem here is we got behind the 8 ball, and in the beginning of 2020, and the test was wrong. The CDC bullied the first test, so it was like we were delayed a month or two, so we couldn't stay ahead of the power curve, as we'd say in the military. And then masking itself became politicized, right away because of conflicting messages from the CDC. We saw that, right? They flip-flopped on it.
Yeah.
And so the public lost trust. And I think a lot of it is around this inconsistent messaging. You learn in public health that your risk communication and messaging is like huge, right? So if you lose that trust with people, it's really hard to get it back. So, and from my own personal experience, like during the H1N1 pandemic, we wanted to get our vaccination rates up to over 90%, which was our goal from the DoD, particularly the Air Force in this case, but I think it was the DoD, and even in pregnant women. And so we had to convince pregnant women that it was safe to take the H1N1 vaccine as opposed to not. So I did town hall meetings on base with families and pregnant women, explaining the risk if you got H1N1 to you and your baby versus the risk of, of the vaccine to you and your child and your baby, right? And when you compare the two, it's again, you don't know what an individual it's going to happen in the individual, but on average, you can say it's riskier for you not to get the vaccine than to come down with H1N1. It's much more risky to yourself and your fetus. So we actually got the vaccination rates over 90% in pregnant women, but it was
without forcing them.
Without forcing them, we didn't hold them down. And that's the other thing. I don't think here's the problem. It's like a soft tyranny, right? So no one's going to hold people down in the United and shove a needle in your arm. It's not going to happen here, and I don't think. But what is going to happen is what you're seeing now is like they're going around the edges, trying to get employer mandates.
You just can't work. That's all.
Yeah, right.
right. You can't work, and
You just can't earn money or otherwise survive.
Or
Hey, you can't work.
doctor, I find myself explaining to doctors, like, oh, I didn't get the vaccine yet because I already had COVID. You have to explain yourself away.
Right. So yeah, then there's another thing. So you have, if you had the disease, right? If you had COVID. So when I went back I had a break in service, and I had chickenpox when I was 17. Bad. Okay. Everywhere, inside, outside. It was down my throat. It was terrible.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was really bad. As you get older, chickenpox is bad.
Yeah. I had it as a kid, but I was younger. But
oh yeah.
One of my cousins, that's when they used to have you go visit your cousins. Yeah.
And when I came back in the Air Force, they're like, okay, it's mandatory now for you to have the varicella vaccine, unless you can show that you have antibody titers. And I was like, okay, here's my arm. I can't wait to see this. And they actually called me and says, we've never seen titers this high. So
Wow.
theoretically, you could do the same thing with coronavirus, right? You can, if we had a good, reliable antibody test. I think the question is, how long does the immunity last? And then see, with chickenpox, it's stable, right? So it's the same virus. It's not going to change. So if you have antibodies to it, you're immune. So, but if you have antibodies to alpha, does that mean you're protected against delta? And if you have antibodies against delta, is you protected against mu? Probably you may or may not be, right? Because it changes so rapidly. So having, and this is why you, like, when you get a common cold, which human coronaviruses cause, among other ones like adenoviruses,
Sure.
when you get a common cold, you can get another cold.
Yeah, right.
The same
Right.
virus, because it's mutated and it's different. So So it's kind of the same thing. So by having an antibody test, you've got antibodies, but is that really going to protect you down the line? And again, so we're in a situation like influenza, right, where you're going to have like annual changes in the virus and annual epidemics. And that's why they reformulate the flu vaccine every year. But the problem with the flu vaccine is they reformulate it based on last year's epidemic. Right. So if it matches, it's pretty effective. If it doesn't, it's not as
They
effective.
get a bad batch.
The mRNA vaccine, the difference with this technology is they can actually use the current strain to produce a vaccine. I don't know if they're going to end up doing this with other things like influenza, because they still use chicken eggs to produce it, but they could have because you could lose up to 60,000 people in a bad flu year. It's like 20,000 to 60, depending on how bad it is. So it's a significant burden of disease. So they could use the mRNA technology for other illnesses, theoretically, like influenza. I mean, I don't know enough about the vaccine development to say that for sure.
People talk about how the last flu season, it was a very small number reported. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answer, but
yeah.
I mean, part of it, like influenza, there's very little. I mean, you can get tested for it, but they model influenza. And it's actually pretty good modeling, right? Because it uses like something called syndromic surveillance. So they know when people come into the emergency room and they have flu-like symptoms and illness during flu season, that's probably flu, right?
Gotcha.
And the problem is with coronavirus,
right.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
overlapping the symptoms,
right.
And there's not a lot of testing done.
Isn't it true that the PCR test could amplify that as well? Because they were over amplifying it.
No. The PCR test is actually, this is another thing. It's a myth. The PCR test is very accurate in what it detects. Yeah, it will not screw up and like detect influenza versus coronavirus and even the variants. I mean, what they're going to do is still sequence. They do sequencing for the variants, but the PCR test is very accurate. It's really a gold standard. You're not going to get a misdiagnosis of influenza when you have a PCR test, because it's looking for a string of DNA that's unique to or RNA in this case to coronavirus. It's not going to overlap with influenza, but so that's the reason why your flu vaccine varies. If the epidemics this year are like last year, the same, the vaccine's pretty effective. If they've changed enough, they call it antigenic drift. If it's drifted enough, it won't be as effective. So the mRNA technology, I mean, I don't know if it can be done with influenza, but maybe it can. Then they can use the current strain that year that they know that's popping up to create the vaccine. And then instead of having a disease burden mortality of 40 to 60,000 people, it's a lot less, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I think the messaging was, just to go back, the messaging was poor in this right from the start. They flip-flopped on a lot of issues. They lost trust with the people. Then they got the vaccine produced quickly, and some people were concerned about that. It went to market too fast, right? It got approved too quickly under the emergency use authorization. I find it interesting, though, that the media would question Donald Trump on this. Remember in the fall, he said, "We're going to have vaccine. The vaccine will be available by the end of December." And It will be. Everybody's telling me it's fine, right? And
And
the
they're like,
media say, well, the experts are saying it's not going to be till March or April, and Trump's
it's
like,
gonna
no,
be
it's
in
I was just in it.
2024.
It's in December, and Trump was right. It came out
Yeah.
at the end of December, wasn't it?
And now they're rushing to it, and
And
but
Kamala
this
said
just
she
sort of
wouldn't take it then,
dispels the
yeah.
whole. It sort of dispels the whole idea that Trump supporters are, cult followers, and they'll do anything he says because, by all accounts, what he did would be a modern miracle and one of his greatest accomplishments in getting
Right.
this pushed through and everything like
Right.
that. And he puts
Right.
it out there. None of the support, and I don't want to say none of the supporters, but so many of the people who want nothing to do with it are Trump supporters. So that completely dispels the myth that people just blindly follow what the guy says.
Yeah.
To a
Right.
degree.
Yeah, and it's but you never hear any corrections or apologies in the media for calling him out on. It's not going to be ready at the
Right.
by the end of December.
never.
It was. It was. I
Several,
remember when the announcement was right when he said it was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, but
high
anyhow, I
profile
mean, this is
people
yeah.
on the left said they wouldn't take it because he was involved with it. I
That's
think
right.
Kamala even
Right.
said that, but now
Yeah.
they're so
Yeah, and if Trump wore a mask, right at the beginning, then the Democrats would have said masking was bad.
That's right.
Isn't that exactly
You're right.
what happened?
Right.
You're right.
And
That's
so
right.
we had these. Everything became politicized, and like for
Yeah.
Governor
Well, wasn't
Wolf,
it go outside and go to Chinatown and everything like that? Weren't they
Yeah.
saying that in the
Yep.
beginning?
They did that here in
Close-
Philly.
That's something
and everything.
Nancy said.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was shutting down travel, Nancy Pelosi was like, "Don't listen to him. Go outside. Go to
right.
Chinatown."
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's
And,
like, hold on a second. Go everybody inside. It's like Simon
and I
says.
think the mistake the governor made is he did not. If I were him, I would have created a bipartisan commission right from the start of the pandemic, and to try to take the politics of it off the table.
Right.
And we didn't see that happen, and so everything just became overly politicized in the whole thing, and it's so hard to sort out the truth.
Go ahead, Mike.
What do you think of the idea that this thing came from a lab?
Yeah, I think it's probably a
Fifth Amendment?
good possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, good
Good
possibility.
possibility.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the index cases were far away from the wet market,
Mm.
right? And so
They
the
just
question-
happen to have this coronavirus lab down the block. That's all right.
so it could have been a lab,
Right.
What
could
the
have been
heck?
got out of the lab, right?
Yeah.
And under the BSL was a
Out of anywhere in the world,
right.
the entire planet.
Oh
And
my
then
gosh.
yes, maybe it came from that place. They're like, shut up! Don't you dare mention that.
Yeah, and then there's the whole thing about the gain of function research, and that means something really specific where you're running the virus through animals to try to get it to mutate into a more aggressive state versus, manipulating it, to make it something different. And there's value to this research, and I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to predict, right, what the next pandemic was going to be, right, so they could develop and anticipate and have a therapeutic ready to go if that happened, right? So
Shouldn't we
that's
just
why
stop
they're
doing that? Maybe.
What's that?
Shouldn't we probably stop doing that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean,
it's just human failure. Like with nuclear plants, viruses, we seem to have a tragic failure rate with these catastrophic events. In my
yeah,
opinion.
I mean, this is really infectious, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to be careful with it, right? I mean, and again, I don't think the jury is fully out on this, but
right.
I'm not sure it's really meets the definition of gain of function research. I mean,
Okay.
so I mean, but they probably were manipulating viruses to try to study them to develop therapeutics. In the lab I was in Dayton, Ohio, we did ran a genomics lab, and we did genetic sequencing on microorganisms, and this was our dream, was we would be able to sequence something and really develop a novel therapeutic quickly
Sure.
to actually address the problem. And we did a lot of diagnostic work where we could take samples. Like if soldiers were downrange, they could take us any sample in the environment, and we'd subtract out what we weren't interested in, and we could tell you exactly what was there, rather than the PCR test where you have to know what you're looking for ahead of time, right? You have to you create that primer. It's only looking for one thing. So we ground up ticks in Ohio and found Rocky Mountain spotted fever in them and some other, tick-borne diseases. And then we told the public health department. They said, you need to let your emergency rooms know that, that your ticks in Ohio have Rocky Mountain spotted fever in case they would see something like that. So we had all this technology. We were doing human genome sequencing and all that jazz. And so our dream was to do exactly what Moderna did, is to have some kind of be able to take, if we could detect something quickly rather than waiting 6 months to 8 months to produce a vaccine, and lose a lot of lives, we could develop something really quickly. Now we're fortunate. I mean, as bad as coronavirus was, it's worse than flu, right? But we're fortunate that it wasn't something like the 20 to not 100% Val, like the 20 to 30% mortality, right, associated with smallpox. I mean, could you imagine a 20 to 30% mortality?
Sure,
Something?
yeah.
Right, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's and then they were willing to trade that off for a 1% mortality from variolation, which is really high, 1 in 100 people, compared to just a minuscule amount of people who die from the current vaccine that we have. And just shows how our perspectives have changed over time in medical history, right? People don't see childhood diseases like they have never seen a child with pertussis. I did, but I did my rotations in Harrisburg when I went to Penn State in Hershey, and I remember seeing a child come in with pertussis. So, if you heard that, it is distressing. It truly is, right? And I'm not trying to make it an emotional argument here. I'm just saying people just don't have, just because of the success of public health and vaccines in general, they don't see the childhood illnesses anymore. And so now the attention that focuses on the side effects, the bad things that happen to vaccines, which happens, right? I don't think there's any doubt. I'm not denying that. I mean, any medication you have, there's going to be side effects and problems.
Sure.
So right. So because we're removed from that now, we don't see what they saw in the 40s and the 50s.
What do you think
Can
about,
I ask
you're
a
talking
question?
about, I'm sorry, I just got one
ahead.
question. So when you're talking about talking to pregnant women about getting a vaccine and talking about different percentages, what do you think of the concept to somebody in that position that, okay, well, if I get the virus, then I get it, and it's not my fault. I didn't intentionally get the virus. But if I intentionally get this vaccine and I do happen to be one of the unlucky ones, then I did it to my damn self.
Yeah, you could blame yourself for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that being some of the mental gymnastics somebody would do, thinking about mental calculus about, well, if I got the vaccine and it hurt maybe I'd blame myself for it. But
I don't understand why
the other thing you could flip that around the reverse too. Well, if I didn't get the vaccine, and I got infected with flu, maybe I could have protected myself if I had the vaccine. And I think that's the more.
It's like, all right, which hand? Which hand?
Likely scenario.
Right.
I just want it does go either way though. So
Yeah.
I had a sort of a question, but just kind of see your thoughts on it. Have you ever been, and there's something to this, but have you ever been in a position where you had to convince a doctor of something? So when you're going to drugs, right? Medication, there's a certain percentage that are going to get side effects from this medication.
Yep.
If you are, again, and I know we're focusing more on the side effects versus it's like public health versus liberty, but beyond just liberty, you're looking out for your personal self, as you were saying. But if you're one of those people who do, and sometimes it's a large chunk of percentage, if you are, have you ever had to convince a doctor, hey, I had this side effect, and with the vaccine, who's tracking that? And if you're the first one to get this side effect, have you ever gone into a doctor and had to convince them of something? That's my concern, and kind of, I think DG, one of our listeners, concerned too.
Yeah.
If you are that person, you have to weigh the risk and benefits, because the devastating effect can change your entire life.
Yes.
And trying to convince somebody of that when their agenda is, hey, this is safe, that's so difficult.
Safe and effective.
Yeah.
Anyway, It's a mantra. I actually have an anthrax mug here, my coffee mug. It's a safe and effective anthrax military mug that they gave out to everybody. I love it.
Really?
Effective.
Yeah,
That's
safe and
exactly.
effective.
Hey,
Yeah, exactly. And they're
Well,
saying that so they're not paying attention to
well, I
these
have a
people
thought
are
on that.
coming-
well, let me answer a question first. So
Yeah.
to answer your question, Liberty, this is what happens. So, and with like the coronavirus vaccines, there's actually two types of surveillance that are going on. Normally with vaccines, they have passive surveillance through a system called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So VAERS is a no barrier whatsoever reporting tool. So in other words, if you believe that you had a bad reaction to your, like I got a flu shot yesterday. If I believe I had a bad reaction to that flu shot, like, I got really terrible body aches or whatever, I could log into the website and I could actually make a VAERS report myself. So there's no, right. And so the CDC set this up so that they could detect rare complications that they wouldn't. So that's a passive surveillance, right? But coronavirus vaccine also has active surveillance. So they're actually looking for the complications like the myocarditis and those things by they proactively ask those questions, to physicians and nurses, and clinics and all that. Is like what are they seeing? And they report those things. So there's like active and passive. They're both of those. So if you go to the physician and say, I think I've had an adverse reaction to the vaccine, especially if it was a coronavirus vaccine, I guarantee you they're going to make a report. They're probably at least going to do a VAERS report and submit that. And so a lot of people, they look at these VAERS reports, they look at all these things that have happened that are associated with a coronavirus vaccine. And the problem is, as our attorneys would use maybe in court, is this type of reasoning called post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? After this, therefore, because of this, in Latin.
That's
Is so
exactly.
right. So it's like, it doesn't mean that, because a certain percentage of people after they get, if you vaccinate 70%, where are we up to close to 70% of your population, a fair number of those people are going to die anyway after they receive the coronavirus vaccination. So the problem is sorting out, was that death due to the vaccine, or were they going to die anyway of something else?
Right.
Well,
And so that's what they have to figure out. And
Right.
that's why they have those systems in place. So give me an example. This works. So there was a vaccine for children called rotavirus vaccine. And they pulled it, actually, they pulled it from the market because it caused something called intussusception of the bowel. And the FDA pulled it off the market. And it was from the surveillance systems like VAERS that they were able to detect that complication. And they were I think for myocarditis, they even pulled, I forget which one it was. Was it Pfizer they pulled off for myocarditis they paused it for a while? I can't
blood
remember.
clotting or something.
Johnson & Johnson. It was one of those. I can't remember. I can't keep this stuff straight. So it's just so much comes at you at a time. So and out of an abundance of caution, they paused, and that tells me that they're at least doing the right things in the surveillance of the vaccine. Because they're pausing even when these complications are extremely rare, right? Because they don't want to be wrong and get in and end up with a complication that they didn't detect, and it's going to hurt a lot of people.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there's not
That sounds
long-term effects.
I think again it sounds like the perfect scenario. So if you get the vaccine and say a couple weeks go by, month goes by, you get a weird twitch. I mean, there are neurological symptoms being reported.
Yes.
You get a twitch. You go to a doctor, maybe you've had some rare things in your past. Doctor, you're not going to go in and say, hey, I got this side effect from the vaccine. You're just saying, hey, I have this twitch. And they have to put it together. Oh, I don't think they're going to go to, hey, I think it's from the vaccine. And I think you can be written off. And I mean, these are things that I've actually experienced in
Possibly,
my life.
Right.
With medications. And that's why I go run far from medications, because it is scary when you have to convince a doctor, hey, this is from the medication. A lot of doctors, especially with females, and not just saying because it's female, they will go right to, oh, it's anxiety, or it's this, or it's that. And I do have to say, I guess my whole point is, I think a lot of what you're saying is really valid. I think you really explained it really well, and you have a lot of experience, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think on the other side of things, I think doctors need to be a little bit more educated on listening more to patients and what they are feeling. They lived in their body, they've had their experience, and if doctors would pay attention more to that, and I think that's some advancements that need to be made, then I would probably trust things more.
Fibromyalgia.
Right.
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 And the
Yes.
fibromyalgia patients were written off for years. as the,
Yes.
Yeah.
kind of
You
nutty
nailed it.
folks, right?
That's one
Right.
of them.
Right.
Yes.
And the case is it
A
isn't
lot of
true.
people
I
still
remember
write it off.
my mother had multiple sclerosis, and she was written off for
Right.
for months before
Yes.
somebody actually
Rheuma-
made the diagnosis. She had MS.
Rheumatoid arthritis. You know,
Right.
a lot of these
Yeah.
things, they're the go-tos. In fact, a lot of if you if you are sent to a neurologist, a lot of people in the rare disease field, they'll say, that's it, that's over for me, because they know that they haven't found what's wrong, and now they're sending you to there. So I think a lot of the people who have COVID side effects are going to be sent to neurologists, and there are some great ones out there, but I think they're going to be sent. And what's going on here? A lot of doctors will, if they don't understand it, they don't know it, they haven't seen the facts, they're going to say, hey, you know, I haven't seen this yet, so
Yeah, it
you
happens
know.
all the time.
Right. So and I think the good news, at least with coronavirus, is everybody's tuned in to reporting everything at this point. And again, if you think you had a side
I hope
effect
so.
from a vaccine, make a VAERS report yourself. You can do it.
Well,
Yeah.
right before
and-
you called back in, I was talking about the VAERS, Dave. I don't know if you heard that part. And I mentioned that there was a Navy commander on Tucker just a couple nights ago. His J.H. Furman. I just looked it back up because I had it in my notes. And he brought up an interesting point on Tucker that the VAERS database has been around for about 20 years. And as of right now, approximately 50% of the reports in the database are from COVID reactions. Now, as we've discussed, we don't know if they're 100% legitimate or not, but that's a pretty
Right.
concerning number when you hear it, especially from a Navy commander.
Yeah. Well, also because people are attuned to VAERS now, and and if they're having a side effect, they're going to report it. And because of the active surveillance that's going on, so
Right,
doctors
right.
are looking. So we're looking for problems too.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for things, then you're going to get more reports on it. So they're going to have to sort it out.
Right.
So and they will. I mean, and it's happening right now, I think. So the only thing I think we really don't know is what are the long-term effects.
Right.
Right. So because and again, it goes back to the trade-off, and the public health concern is they wanted to save people's lives now. Right. If you waited too long, they knew that they would lose X amount of people, and so that we want to try to save as many lives as possible. And that was the Operation Warp Speed, was to try to get things to market, get a vaccine approved right away to save as many lives as we could. Like I said, fortunately, it's not a smallpox scenario, or even worse, an Ebola scenario or something like that, where it's going to be really high mortality rate. I mean, it's like 0.2, 0.3% or something, but that's pretty high. That's like 2 or 3 times flu. So and we've had and I forgot, what the thing that really drives this, like the masking, the mitigation efforts, and trying to slow the spread down, is so that the hospital systems don't get overwhelmed.
Sure.
Right. So they don't want to have a ICU beds full of patients with COVID, because then the other people who need ICU beds don't have it. So and that's some of the reason. It's just the public health burden on the hospital system. So they're trying to keep things to a dull roar, so that the emergency facilities and the ICUs aren't overwhelmed. So for example, like in the South, some of the states, actually not even the South. I mean, my colleague in Dayton texted me about a week ago and said there were 2 pediatric ICU beds left in Dayton Hospital, Dayton Children's.
Oh, wow.
And because it was filled with COVID patients. And again, I mean, Dayton's a fairly big city, but there are less numbers of pediatric ICU beds than there are adult ICU beds. And even if, virtually all kids who get this are going to recover and have no problems, but if you have even a slightly increased percentage of children who get really sick from it,
Right.
they're going to fill up the hospital really quick. Right. So I think that is.
I like to see fewer children, and I'm pro fewer children in ICU beds.
Yes,
Maybe
yeah,
I'm I'm
Right.
controversial, Doctor.
Right. So that's what they're
Stop
trying
it,
to do, is kind of slow it down. I mean, again,
Yeah.
most people are going to recover from this. We know that, but now Delta affects children more than Alpha did. Alpha seemed like it didn't much, but now they're seeing the kids getting into the ICU. It's a small percentage, but it's enough of a percentage to make an impact on the hospital system. And then then again, now that there are kids with leukemia, there and other types of cancer, there are trauma cases, and those children will need ICU beds. So then if they're all taken up by COVID patients, then that's a public health issue, right?
Mhm.
So then we have to have overflow capacity. So I think the concern is what they're trying to do is reduce the public health impact on the hospital system through mitigation efforts, like things like masking, and
Maybe they should
I
keep
think
some of the nurses. DG brings up a good point in the comments there. They're getting rid of these nurses for not getting vaccinated and stuff.
yeah, I
Creating
mean,
more of a health crisis in a way.
yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, and
I know it's a balancing act, but
yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say one way or the other. I think people do have a legitimate concern,
yeah.
because this is a new vaccine. We've never used it before, and I understand why people would be concerned not to take. I would never force it on people. I would not.
Yeah, that's
And
problem I have.
I would take the approach, to be honest with you, like Sweden does, right? And all the vaccines are optional, right? No one, and yet they have a high vaccine uptake rate because they
Yeah.
didn't force it on people, and they can make a decision, and they could have the consistent public health messaging, and people make their own decisions, and it's kind of like you set up a sign and it says, "Don't walk on the grass." And as soon as you put up the sign,
Sam.
everybody's going to walk on the grass.
Don't walk on the grass, Sam.
Don't tell
Yeah,
me what
otherwise
to
it's
do.
just gonna-
I'll walk where I want to walk.
Right, that's right, exactly, right.
Like
so,
Governor
so,
Murphy
you
versus
get all
Mike.
this pushback, and
Yeah. Live free or die.
I don't know if you saw Mike. Alan Dershowitz has a book coming out. I think it's out. It's called Constitutionality of Vaccine Mandates or something like that.
I didn't see that he had a book coming out. I'm interested in that. I have seen him debate a couple of people.
He thinks it's
in long form.
constitutional. Yeah.
Right. Well, he's got a case to back it up.
Yeah, the 1905 case
Right.
from Massachusetts.
And ultimately, that case led to some more really bad cases. Bad facts make bad law sort of
Right.
thing. It might have been an issue where, to some degree, the court was like, "You're really bringing a $5 fine to the Supreme Court? Get the hell out of here, sir!" So we'll see if it would pan out that same way with today's makeup, with today's implications.
Right.
He's gone as far as saying that the government can come into your home and jab you in the arm with force as a result of that case. I think that the
goodness.
facts in that case were dramatically different. Saying that you could fine somebody $5, although you might say it's the same analysis and reasoning, it just in reality is different than taking somebody, holding them down by force
Right.
and jabbing needle into their arm.
Right.
Whether or
Right.
not you want to say
Exactly.
legally it's different, it's different. So I don't know. Hopefully we won't get to that point where we've got to
Right. And
deal with that.
I think
but we
how
may.
it's going to play out is like this: in a year or two from now, a lot of people will have contracted coronavirus in whatever variant form. There'll be more people vaccinated, and it'll settle into the human population like flu is settled in the human population, and it'll be something we live. It's called an endemic disease. And then we'll have we'll have another flu-like illness that we'll have to deal with every year. And over time, it should be decreased. There'd be decreased fatality, and the virus should not be as deadly over time. And because of evolutionary pressure in the virus, but occasionally it will become like flu. Occasionally there will be a deadly variant if there's a mutation, like particularly with coronaviruses and flu. It go through animals. It goes through an animal or a Wuhan lab or something like that,
Oh, dear.
and then it's
Right.
accidentally released, or
Accidental quotes.
But here's a final question. When you look at the measures that have been taken over the last year and a half or so, and you hear this stat being thrown out there about the decrease in flu cases, and you gave an explanation as to why that may be.
maybe yes.
Do you think that the government could take this opportunity to come back after, we've flattened the curve, we got coronavirus under control, and say, well, if you look at the numbers, look at the precautions that we took with these masks, the social distancing and things of that nature, we saved tens of thousands of lives
Mhm.
from flu deaths because of these measures.
Mhm.
So we need to do this every year from now on. And if you don't want to participate, then you must want tens of thousands of people to die, and you're just a selfish person, and you're a very, very bad person.
Yeah, there's always a danger of that. I hope that doesn't happen with flu, and I think part of the reason why it won't is flu vaccine is approved for everyone 6 months age and older, so that can be given to children.
But are
And
they going to mandate that?
they have not
They've,
yet,
they've never, right?
right? They have
yeah, they
not.
haven't.
But are we in a
Right.
state of transition now with our government and what they've got the I don't know.
It's Philly Chris's
what
territory.
word can I use? It's getting late. I don't know what words I'm allowed to say.
No,
That's
I agree
all.
with you. And it could happen, and I think one of the vaccines is going to be approved from like 5 or older, if I remember right. And hopefully there's enough voluntary uptake they don't have to even think about it. Kind of like but I just don't think it's a good idea. In my opinion, as bad as coronavirus is, it's probably not serious enough where we have to make decisions like that.
Yeah.
Like they had to
Numbers
do with
don't
New
support
England with smallpox, where they traded a 1% or 2% mortality for a 30% mortality. I mean, we're not talking about that, right? Right. So, or a bad flu, or let's take the 1918 flu, right? That was horrendous. So in San Francisco, there was a mask mandate in San Francisco in 1918, and there were actually the police shot people for not wearing a mask.
Oh my!
No kidding.
Are you for real?
Oh yeah, it did happen.
Oh my gosh!
We've got to take a look at that.
Well, that's
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, see, that's what I worry about where this is headed. Like,
Yeah,
stuff
so
like
I mean, it was
so much,
that, and
yeah.
they lulled themselves into a false sense of security. San Francisco was ready. They had mask mandates, and the shutdowns in 1918 were severe. They closed churches, they closed everything.
Yeah,
and
it's very similar.
yeah, it was but it was a lot more deadly too.
Right.
It was,
Weren't the masks actually causing pneumonia too? Some of the material they used in the masks.
I don't know about that, but they were gauze masks. They really weren't that effective. And like
They
the
used
second wave in San
asbestos
Francisco, they got hit hard.
I've seen something about it, but I didn't know if you knew more about it. I don't know the details.
So I mean, so it's not as bad as 1918.
They used to
Thank
mask
God.
all
might
out
have.
of asbestos.
I have a quick practical question. How come you just needed like one shot with the other, I guess like smallpox or chickenpox, you just get it. You don't need it again. But like with flu, you have to keep getting it and it changes. And with COVID, it's, kind of unsure. But how come certain viruses you just need a one and done, and other ones it keeps changing and it's all tough?
Well, your immunity will wane over time. So like that's one of the questions with the chickenpox vaccine, actually. So we give children a chickenpox vaccine. How long does that immunity last? Right. And so now let's say they're 30 or 40 years old and the immunity's waned and now they get chickenpox when they're 40. That's not good.
I actually didn't know that.
Right.
I figured they figured that one out by now.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably good. The immunity is probably long lasting. I would think it would be. But again, it's not, we don't have like 50, 60 years of data on it either. Right. So the children who've gotten the chickenpox vaccine, I mean, what if they're exposed later? When they're older. I mean, that's so the immunity wanes, so they may need a booster, that would be the solution to it, is that if that happens, they'll recommend a booster for that. That's the reason. So you have to know, like, you have is immunity long life. So anthrax vaccine, even though anthrax is stable, I mean, you have to have periodic doses to keep your immunity up. It's always so if you have the contracted chickenpox, you have lifetime immunity, but as you get older, as your immunity wanes, you can get shingles from your chickenpox. I was just going to
ask you about shingles.
Shingles,
right?
Yeah.
So it pops back out, and that's why I took the Shingrix vaccine to prevent that.
Yeah.
So that's a reactivation of chickenpox. So if you got chickenpox, stay out of a nursing home because you can wipe them all out. I mean, it's that contagious, and so that's the thing is, from a public health perspective, what are the longer term effects of a chickenpox vaccine down the road, right? I mean, now the kids who got it a few years ago, now they're 50, 60 years old. Are we going to see isolated cases of chickenpox, that are more severe?
Mhm.
at that age, because it's very, as you get older, chickenpox is serious.
Okay.
If they were
Right. So I mean,
yeah, we gotta have would you be
Yeah.
willing to come back on the program and discuss this kind of stuff again?
yeah. I
Because
mean, just let
just
everybody
totally-
know this is not an intent to give medical advice, and or anything like that.
we're having a discussion. We're
That's
having a
it.
discussion.
That's it. And I'm retired too, so
We
not
don't give
actively
any advice
practicing.
on this program because we're not sending people bills at the end, right?
That's right. No medical advice.
Yeah.
No medical
it's
advice,
fascinating,
no
though,
legal
so-
advice, no financial advice, no
right.
no UFO advice, right, Philly Chris?
I
Right,
just
yeah, how
wanted
many
to.
UFOs did you see in the military, though?
That's for a different
I just
episode.
wanted to know why he was going around talking about guns and gun laws so much when he knew all this information about health.
Well, this has
Yeah,
been a
really.
several decade-long career.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you know what? If our firearms rights are taken away from us,
None of this
it's
matters.
a slippery slope into every other form
None
of
of this
tyranny.
matters. If our gun rights get taken away, nothing else matters.
I
Yeah.
None
agree
of this
with
will
you.
matter. All right. Thank you, Dr. Fennell. I will close us out from here. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's all the time we've got for today. Stick around for We the People, The Constitution Matters. Pastor David Whitney, Professor Phil Duffy. I'll be joining as your legal analyst. We miss you, Ellie. Daddy